Chapter 2379. Meg received Cynthia's first draft a week later. When he received the thick draft, Meg praised Cynthia's efficiency and diligence. Compared to the original script, it was obvious that there were more than 100 million details added. However, after Meg made himself a pot of black tea, he leisurely sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and flipped open the thick Phantom of Lust. Cynthia sat across from him, holding the hot tea with both hands, carefully observing Meg's expression. This was the first time she handed over a draft to her boss face to face. She was a little nervous, a little embarrassed, and a little expectant. This was her painstaking work for a week, not only because of her passion, but also because Meg had given her too much. After a long while, Meg closed the book slowly and stared at Cynthia with a strange expression for a while. He took a sip of tea and put the cup down gently as he helplessly said, "Do you know how many years you would be sentenced to if you were in another place?" "Ah." Cynthia was confused. "Don't play dumb. I told you to add more details. Why did you only add in that aspect?" Someone said, when the light went out, the bed swayed, and the room was filled with spring sunshine. "That's just a simple plot, but you expanded it to 20,000 words. Meg held his forehead, feeling like he was going to split open. "Didn't you tell me to write something I'm good at?" Cynthia lowered her head and blushed. She still felt wronged. "I'm talking about details." "Details? Are they not detailed enough?" "Ah." Meg looked at Cynthia, speechless for a moment. The two of them stared at each other in silence for a while before Meg picked up the book again. He skipped over the details that were not suitable for children, and found that the overall quality of the book was quite good. It had already transformed from an obscure script into a readable one. This girl was indeed talented, but it was a pity that she was not used in the right way. "You have to change it." Meg put down the book again and looked at Cynthia. Cynthia pursed her lips. When she wrote, she was most afraid of the editor telling her to change it. Changing the text was much more painful than writing it. "Where should I change it?" Cynthia couldn't afford to offend her patron, so she could only ask. "Edit the parts that are not suitable for children to the level that children can watch," Meg said. Cynthia blinked and asked, "What are the specific standards?" Meg thought for a while and said, "Don't write anything below the neck." "A world with only brains," Cynthia exclaimed. Meg rolled his eyes. "It's not just the brain. Don't describe it in detail." "How can that be? The most important thing is the details. Without the details, it would lose the sense of reality." "I can't accept this kind of modification," Cynthia retorted. Meg was surprised by Cynthia's rebuttal and muttered, "But this book is aimed at a wider audience." "Then just tell the children not to read it. There are not only children in this world, and I'm not writing a children's book. Why should I make do with them? Don't tell me that if I don't write about it in the book, they won't see the pretty girls in short skirts and tube tops on the streets. If they can't see it in the open, they will also hide under their blankets and read it secretly," Cynthia said with a serious expression and a firm tone. Meg looked at Cynthia and couldn't help but laugh. He nodded and said, "Okay, then we won't follow this standard. But you still have to cut out the plot. This is a serious novel. The focus is on the development of the relationship between the male and female leads and the plot of facing the enemy together. This is enough to support the story. I hope that if this novel can be widely circulated, it's because the story itself is exciting, and not because it's suitable for people to hide under their blankets and read secretly. But, if you insist on adding this plot, then you have to sign Cynthia at the back of the book," Meg said indifferently. Cynthia opened her mouth, but in the end, she nodded obediently. "Okay." She didn't dare to do something as shameful as signing her real name. And just as Meg said, this was a very good story. Even without the plot, it wouldn't affect the excitement of the story at all. Moreover, it would have a wider audience. Take it back and edit it. You can keep that part of the content first. If this book becomes popular, it can be published as an adult version of the novel. Meg pushed the book in front of Cynthia. Is that okay? Cynthia's eyes lit up. She was still regretting that the content she had painstakingly written would be deleted just like that. Meg gave her another way out. The premise is that the original novel becomes popular first. Meg smiled. So, go back and edit it carefully. Okay, then I'll go back first. Cynthia put down the cup, picked up the book on the table, and got up to leave. It's rare to see such a hardworking author. Meg watched Cynthia's back disappear out the door and smiled as he muttered to himself. After drinking 2 cups of tea, Meg also got up and pushed his bicycle out. Apart from going to Hope School to teach the children, Meg also built a film studio in the periphery of the Magic Beast mountain range outside the city. The location was naturally very important to film a movie. Meg went around Chaos City, but couldn't find a suitable location. In the end, he decided to spend his own money to build one. He changed the story of a Chinese ghost story. The story no longer took place in Lanruo Temple, but in a cave in the mountains. The male lead wasn't a bookkeeping scholar who had nowhere to stay, but a chef who accidentally entered the cave in search of ingredients. The cave was built on a cliff in the periphery of the Magic Beast mountain range. It was remodeled from a natural cave. There was a small opening in the mountain, and there seemed to be light coming in through the opening. It was very narrow at first, but after walking for dozens of steps, it suddenly opened up. Meg chose this place because it was a huge natural karst cave. With a little modification, it would become a beautiful scenic spot. Moreover, the interior of the cave extended in all directions, and was enough to satisfy most of the fighting needs. The number of scenes that needed to be built was also greatly reduced. When Meg arrived at the scene, a group of elves was building a bamboo house. An underground river flowed slowly around the house, and fishes could be seen swimming happily in the clear river water. The ceiling of the cave was inlaid with luminous pearls for illumination. Of course, these weren't real luminous pearls, but lamp beads that imitated luminous pearls. The illumination effect was much better than luminous pearls, and most importantly, it was cheaper. Mr. Meg. A few elves greeted Meg familiarly. Thank you for your hard work. Meg nodded with a smile. His projects were all contracted by the night elves during this period, so there were many familiar faces at the scene. The elves were meticulous and serious in their work, and their work efficiency was high. Apart from being a little more expensive, they were much more useful than the dwarven construction team. From today onwards, I will officially resume 2 chapters. This time, I will definitely do what I say. While I'm at it, I will ask for monthly votes. End of chapter. Chapter 2380. Meg inspected the site and pointed out a few minor problems. Then he left the cave. According to the current progress of the construction, the set would be completed in 3 days. As for the location, Meg had already thought about it. He would shoot it directly in the World of Warcraft forest. He didn't even need extras. He would just use World of Warcraft as the villains. Of course, to increase the visual effect and shock, Meg also planned to go to the Demon Islands and Dragon Island to shoot some scenes. Meg rode down the mountain on his bicycle and bumped into the Rose mercenary squad, who were about to enter the mountain. Mr. Mac, why are you here? Chiwill was surprised. Scott, Skoll, and the others also greeted Mag. There's a construction site here, so I came to check it out. Meg stopped the bicycle and looked at Chiwill, who was wearing black leather armor. He smiled and said, "Are you guys going into the mountains for a mission?" Chi-Will wondered what kind of construction site Meg had in the World of Warcraft mountains. But he still answered, "Yes, we received a temporary mission. We're going into the mountains to try our luck." Meg looked at his watch. It was almost noon. Normally, mercenary groups wouldn't choose to enter the mountains at this time. After sunset, the World of Warcraft mountains would be deadly. "Isn't it a bit late to enter the mountains now?" Meg looked at Chi-Will and asked. He didn't want this woman to think that the Rose mercenary group was strong enough to do whatever she wanted in the World of Warcraft mountains just because she was lucky enough to meet him last time. Chi-Will nodded. "Yes. That's why we're here today. We're just going to set up a few traps and prepare to return to the city." For some reason, he felt that Meg's tone was a bit familiar. "Good luck. I have to go back and prepare for lunch." Meg said goodbye with a smile and rode down the mountain. He was overthinking things. Chi-Will was an experienced mercenary. After the previous incident, he would not be so foolish as to put his mercenaries in unnecessary danger. "Mr. Mac's two-wheeled car is really good. When I have money, I'll get one too." Sydney looked at Meg's back and said enviously. "Come on, monkey. Do you think you can carry that thing and run on the tree?" Scott laughed. Everyone laughed along, and the air was filled with a joyful atmosphere. Chi-Will retracted his gaze from Meg, his gaze becoming sharp and cautious. "Continue forward. We need to hurry. We have to leave the mountain range of magical beasts before sunset." The group members also responded and followed suit, no longer joking around. When Meg returned to the dining room, there was already a long line outside the door. In the kitchen, Phyllis and Camilla were preparing the ingredients and preparing for the meal. "Phyllis, is the tofu pudding ready?" Meg asked as he washed his hands after changing into his chef's uniform upstairs. "Yes, the tofu pudding is ready. The red braised pork and braised chicken are also in the pot," Phyllis replied with a smile. "Good. Thank you for your hard work." Meg nodded. During this time, Phyllis had made rapid progress. After mastering the recipe of the tofu pudding, she had also mastered the red braised pork and braised chicken. She was responsible for most of the dishes that needed to be prepared in advance, which greatly reduced Meg's workload. "The vegetables are also cut," Camilla said in a muffled voice. Meg looked at the neatly arranged ingredients and smiled. "You've worked hard too. Let's call it a day." Camilla put away her finger knife and walked to the kitchen door. When she walked to Meg's side, she said telepathically, "After the meal tonight, meet me in the grove west of the square." "That's not very good." Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at Camilla. Camilla had already walked past him and didn't give him a chance to refuse. A single man and a single woman meeting in the grove in the middle of the night. Meg decided to go alone tonight to see what tricks she had up her sleeves. After the lunch service, Meg brought Yabamiya to Hope Academy for class. It was Friday, and his advanced class for the God of Cookery was scheduled for the afternoon. There were no changes to the list of 32 students for the time being. Although the children in the class had different talents, they were all very enthusiastic about learning to cook. This made Meg feel very pleased. Teacher Meg. When Meg arrived at the building of practical training, a teenager stood up from the stairs and came up to him excitedly. "Beck, why are you here so early again?" Meg looked at the teenager in front of him with a smile. "I'm a slow learner, so I wanted to come early to practice," Beck said with an honest smile. He was a little embarrassed. "Come in." Meg pushed the door open with a smile and brought Beck into the hall. There was still half an hour before class started. Meg arrived early to prepare for class. Beck was always the first one to wait for him outside the practical training center. He was also the last one to leave after class so that he could practice more. This child's talent was average. It wasn't outstanding, but it wasn't bad either. However, he was still lacking in height and stamina compared to his classmates. Fortunately, he was diligent enough and could keep up with the class. As usual, you can contact them yourself, provided that you don't hurt yourself, Meg said to Beck and went upstairs alone. Okay, Beck replied quickly and walked straight to his personal stove. In the practical training center, everything was the best. There were extremely sharp kitchen knives, powerful stoves, and an unlimited supply of ingredients for practicing knife skills. The second child to come to the practical training center was Farah. Mia opened the door for her. Sister Mia. Farah greeted Mia with a somewhat intimate tone. Mia looked at Farah dotingly. She smiled and reached out to pinch Farah's hair bun. Farah's hair is tied up very nicely today. However, there's a small problem with the angle. Big sister will adjust it for you. Farah obediently took a step forward and lowered her head slightly, allowing Mia to tie up her hair again. The little girl liked to use her short hair to cover her ears and most of her eyes. Under Mia's encouragement, she tied up her hair, revealing her ears and her clean and delicate face. Oh, so cute. Mia pinched Farah's soft cat ears and said with a smile. Farah blushed and whispered, "Thank you, Sister Mia." Are you going to practice cooking or read today? Mia asked. Read, Farah said without hesitation. Go. Teacher Meg is on the second floor. If you want to read anything, just ask him. Go to my office. Mia nodded with a smile. Okay. A smile appeared on Farah's face. She glanced at Beck, who was seriously practicing his knife skills, and quietly went upstairs. Chapter 2381. Meg looked up at the door when he heard the footsteps. Farah put down her hand that was about to knock on the door, and softly said, Teacher Meg, I want to borrow a book to read. Choose what book you want to read. You can put it back after you're done, Meg said with a gentle smile. Farah nodded with a smile. She walked in, and quickly took out a Norland Continent Chronicles book from the bookshelf before pushing it out of Meg's office. This girl. I didn't expect her to be so interested in history, Meg murmured to himself softly. Farah had left a deep impression on him and Mia since the first class. She was an introverted child with low self-esteem. And in the past 2 weeks of interaction, this child had shown an astonishing talent in learning how to cook. If Beck was a diligent child with ordinary talent, then Farah was a genius child in others' eyes. While the other children were still fretting over how to control the wide kitchen knife and cut the ingredients into flat sections, Farah could already prepare all the ingredients for Yangzhou fried rice, and it was the kind that Meg couldn't be picky about. Back then, Meg was almost tortured to insanity in the test field for the god of cookery, but Farah only used 2 classes to master it. Her cat bloodline gave her extraordinary observation and control, and she obviously had a smart brain. The talent in cooking that she had shown, and Mia's interaction with her classmates, seemed to have untied many of the knots in her heart. She seemed to be more cheerful than before. However, she was still quiet. She no longer hid in a corner, and now had a hobby of reading. Meg had everything, including a lot of books. Therefore, he allowed her to come to the training center half an hour before class to read. Farah returned to Meg's office 5 minutes before class started, carrying the books. If you like them, take them home and read them slowly. You can return them when you're done, Meg said with a smile. A hint of joy flashed across Farah's eyes, but she quickly shook her head, and said, Mother said that I have to finish the homework assigned by the teacher after school. I can't waste time doing other things. Meg helped her put the heavy book back on the shelf, then looked at her and asked, There's no class tomorrow on Saturday. Farah, do you want to work part-time at the restaurant? Farah's eyes lit up, but soon revealed some hesitation and confusion. Just tell your mother that I invited you. Your learning progress is different from your classmates, so I plan to teach you something different, Meg said with a smile. A smile appeared on Farah's face as he looked at Meg and asked, "What time will we be at your restaurant tomorrow?" "Arrive at the restaurant at 6:30 in the morning. The part-time job lasts for an entire day. You can experience what it takes to run a restaurant from morning to night." "Okay, I'll be there on time." Farah nodded and went downstairs. Meg tidied up the lesson plans on the table and went downstairs. The children had all arrived, and none of them were idle. They were practicing their knife skills seriously. In order to become an excellent chef, a solid foundation was very important. Meg walked around the training hall. From the finished products on the students' chopping boards, he could see their current standards and whether they had trained at home in the past few days. 2 classes a week was too short for learning how to cook. If they did not practice at home, how could they talk about improvement? In this world, geniuses like Farah were few and far between. Fortunately, Meg was gratified that most of the students had obvious improvement in their knife skills. The degree of improvement was different, but there were traces of practice. "Clyde, have you not touched a kitchen knife since you came home?" Meg asked calmly as he stopped beside a slightly chubby boy and looked at the potatoes of different sizes on his chopping board. The boy called Clyde blushed and put down the kitchen knife in his hand. He lowered his head and answered softly, "Teacher, I don't have a kitchen knife at home." "You don't have a kitchen knife?" This answer stunned Meg. "My mother never cuts her food. She always cooks it directly and eats it with her hands. My father has a big knife, but he never lets me touch it." Clyde buried his head deeper and stole a glance at Meg. "But my mother promised me that she would buy me a kitchen knife soon. That way, I can practice my knife skills at home." Meg looked at the boy whose head was almost buried in his chest and suddenly felt sorry and guilty. "It's okay. Although you didn't practice much, your cutting skills have improved compared to the last class. Keep up the good work. You can do better." Meg patted his shoulder gently. Clyde raised his head in disbelief and met Meg's encouraging eyes. It was as if a ray of light suddenly shone into his heart and filled him with motivation. "Let's continue," Meg said as he walked to the next student. Looking at these children in their new school uniforms, he sometimes forgot that they came to Hope School from extremely poor families. Some things that he took for granted might not be so for them. For children from poor families, it was difficult to even fill their stomachs. It was almost impossible for them to practice their cooking skills at home. "Okay, children, that's the end of the pre-class practice. We won't talk about knife skills in today's class. I'll introduce you to the use of various pots and pans." Meg came to the podium and loudly interrupted the students' knife skills practice. The class began. Yabamiya sat upright in the back row with a notebook beside his hand. He took down a few key points from time to time, just like the 33rd student. Unknowingly, the bell signaling the end of school rang. The children looked at Meg expectantly. According to the experience of the previous classes, Teacher Meg would cook dinner for them and let them go home after eating. "Children, I'm not going to cook dinner for you today," Meg said with a smile. Hearing this, the children could not hide their disappointment. "However, I've prepared a gift for all of you." Meg raised his hand and pointed to the back of the training hall. The children all turned around. Mia stood with a smile on her face. 32 grayish-black cloth bags were neatly arranged beside her. A pot handle peeked out from the cloth bag. "This is..." The children were puzzled and puzzled. After these days of learning, you have a general understanding of cooking. In order for you to practice your cooking skills at home, I've prepared an iron pot and a kitchen knife for each of you. There's also a bag of potatoes in the bag. The homework I've arranged for you this time is to cook dinner for your family with potatoes when you get home, Meg said with a smile. A kitchen knife and an iron pot. The children's eyes lit up one after another. Am I finally going to have my own kitchen knife? Clyde jumped up in excitement. End of chapter. Chapter 2382. The children happily carried Meg's gifts home. Compared to a delicious dinner, having their own kitchen knife and wok made them feel more excited. In today's class, Mr. Meg had just taught them how to make a dish called sour and spicy shredded potatoes. It looked very simple. Now that they had a kitchen knife and wok, as well as potatoes and side dishes, the children couldn't wait to go home and show off their cooking skills to their families. Aren't those the students of the advanced class for the God of Cookery? What are they carrying on their backs? School bags. No, it looks like a wok. Look, there's even a wok handle. Giving out wok in class. This Mr. Meg is quite interesting. The other teachers and students were quite surprised to see the children of the advanced class for the God of Cookery neatly carrying black backpacks. Boss, didn't you say that you would only give them the kitchen knife and wok after their cooking skills were recognized by you? Yabamiya asked Meg with a puzzled look as he helped to pack up the things. That's what I thought before. Giving them the kitchen knife and wok would be a recognition of their graduation. Meg nodded with a smile. But I suddenly understood something today. For these children, perhaps not all of them can reach the level I recognize, but if they have a suitable kitchen knife for daily practice, their chances of success will be higher. As long as they work hard enough, that's enough. Yabamiya nodded thoughtfully and looked at Meg with a smile. Boss, you're really a good person. Meg smiled noncommittally and walked towards the door. We should go back and prepare for business. Mother, I'm back. Farah walked into a dark and narrow bungalow with a black cloth bag on his back. A somewhat stooped and thin figure stood up from the only small window in the room. She poured a bowl of water from a chipped pottery bowl and smiled at Farah. Farah, you're back. Are you tired from class today? Farah took the pottery bowl and gulped down the water in a few mouthfuls. He smiled and said, I'm not tired. I'm not tired from class at all. What are you carrying? Mother noticed the black cloth bag on Farah's back. This is a gift from Mr. Meg. An iron pot, a kitchen knife, and a bag of potatoes. Farah put the cloth bag on the ground and took out several things from it. The last thing he took out was a book, A Wonderful Journey to the World. Farah stared blankly at the book in his hand. His eyes immediately reddened, but he couldn't help but smile. This was a book on Teacher Meg's bookshelf. She originally planned to read this book after she finished reading the Chronicles. She didn't expect that he would actually give this book to her. So many things. This is too expensive. Did Teacher Meg really give them to all the children? Farah's mother said uneasily as she stroked the smooth bottom of the pot. She had never seen such a good pot before. Yes, Mother. The teacher said that he gave us the pot and kitchen knife so that we can practice our cooking skills better at home. Farah nodded and put the book in his hand on the bed at the side. He said, also, he gave us homework today. We have to cook dinner for the family with potatoes. You're going to cook? Farah's mother looked at her in surprise. Yes. I learned how to cook potatoes today. Farah nodded. He took out 4 potatoes from the bag and walked into the simple kitchen at the side. Farah's mother, Isha, followed him in. Although the family was not well off, she had never let Farah cook alone since she was young. Some time ago, Farah had successfully entered Hope's school with the help of Principal Luna. Last week, the child had come back and said that she had entered the advanced class for the god of cookery and was going to learn cooking skills from the world's best chef. Isha was already very gratified that the child could eat her fill every day and learn how to read and learn. As for the matter of Farah learning to cook, she did not take it to heart. She just did not want the child to delay her studies and did not ask much about it. Being a chef was not an easy task. Although she did some small handicrafts at home every day and did not go out, she had heard that the son of the family next door had become a chef's apprentice. Not only did he eat well, but he also had a salary of 1,000 copper coins a month. He had become the envy of the neighbors. However, being a chef was not an easy task. She had heard that the son of that family had not been home for more than a month. He stayed in the kitchen every day to practice his cooking skills. 2 days ago, his father went to visit him and said that he ate well, but he had lost a lot of weight. As for her own child, who studied 2 classes at school every week, also wanted to become a chef. Isha did not believe that the teacher was really that good. Farah looked at the pot of porridge that was still half full. He said, "I'll heat up the porridge and then stir-fry some hot and sour shredded potatoes. Then, I'll make some salt and pepper potatoes." What? Isha was puzzled. Today, the teacher taught us to cook 2 dishes in class. However, the salt and pepper potatoes were only briefly mentioned without a demonstration. "I want to try cooking them," Farah said as he heated up the porridge. Food is a very precious thing. You can't waste it, Isha said seriously. During this period of time, Farah had been eating at school. Their family was slightly better off, but they were still poor. These foods called potatoes seemed to be able to fill their stomachs. It would be a pity if Farah wasted them. "Yes, I know." Farah nodded and grasped the kitchen knife at the side. Isha felt that Farah seemed to have suddenly become a different person. Her eyes were filled with a confidence that surprised her. She held a potato in each hand. The broad kitchen knife stuck to the surface of the potato and spun quickly. A thin and long potato skin extended downward. In the blink of an eye, the skin of 4 potatoes had been peeled off. Looking at the potato skin again, it was as thin as paper. Its width was uniform, and there were no cracks in the middle. The peeled potatoes were placed on the chopping board. As the kitchen knife rose and fell, there were even sounds of duck duck duck. 2 potatoes were cut into even thin strips, and then soaked in a bowl of clear water at the side. The remaining 2 potatoes were cut into evenly sized hot pieces and soaked in a bowl for later use. This knife skill. At the side, Isha's mouth was wide open for a long time. She had an expression of disbelief. Was this really her child? When did she master such exquisite knife skills? Farah did not notice the change in her mother's mood. Her attention was completely focused on cooking. Although her knife skills were already quite good, this was the first time she was cooking by herself. The porridge in the pot was already bubbling. She took a towel and placed the pot on the ground. Then, she placed the iron pot on the stove. She rubbed the pork skin at the bottom of the pot, leaving behind a bit of oil. First, she stir-fried the dried chili in the pot until it was spicy. Then, she poured in the dried shredded potatoes. Farah held the iron pot in one hand and the spatula in the other. The golden shredded potatoes were stir-fried in the pot, and the fragrance gradually spread out. "It smells so good." Isha, who was watching from the side, could not help but swallow her saliva. End of chapter. Chapter 2383. A portion of golden hot and sour shredded potato with a few red chili peppers, a portion of salt and pepper potato cubes, and a bowl of hot porridge. This was Inni and Farah's dinner. "Mother, try it." Farah sat opposite Inni and looked at her expectantly. This was the first time she had tried to cook by herself, and the process was very smooth. Apart from the slight stickiness at the beginning, there was no overall effect, and the dish was ready in one go. The hot and sour aroma wafted over along with the hot steam, making one's mouth water. "I didn't expect you to learn how to cook after just a few tries, Farah. This teacher is really amazing," Innie praised as she picked up a piece of shredded potato with her chopsticks and put it into her mouth. The sourness and spiciness first intertwined and burst forth on the tip of the tongue, stimulating the taste buds intensely. The shredded potato was crisp and refreshing, bringing an indescribable sense of deliciousness. "It's delicious." Innie's eyes instantly lit up as she looked at the brightly colored shredded potato in front of her in disbelief. She rarely tasted delicious food in her life, but this portion of hot and sour shredded potato made her feel that it was even more delicious than the meat that she rarely had during festivals. "Mother, what's wrong? Is it not delicious?" Farah looked at Innie, whose eyes were glistening with tears, and asked carefully. "No." Innie sniffed and looked at Farah with gratification. "It's too delicious. This is the most delicious food I've ever eaten." Farah's face gradually blossomed with a smile. She had never heard such praise from her mother before. Furthermore, looking at her mother's teary eyes, the meaning of Farah learning to cook suddenly became clear at this moment. Wasn't it the best reason to let her mother eat delicious food and let her live a better life? "Then you have to eat more." Farah also picked up her chopsticks and began to eat, tasting the shredded potato first. The crispy, sour, and spicy shredded potato was refreshing and delicious, and went especially well with rice. However, to Farah, she felt that something was still missing. The texture of the shredded potato was a little lacking, probably due to the heat control when it was put into the pot. The vinegar taste was a little too strong, and the spiciness was probably a little too strong for her mother. She didn't expect the small chili to be so spicy. "I should be able to do better next time," Farah thought to himself. What Meg-sensei said was indeed correct. Cooking required constant trial and practice to find their own problems in practice, and then improve again. As for the salt and pepper potatoes, the taste was not bad, but it was not as outstanding as the sour and spicy shredded potatoes. Meg had only announced the recipe for this dish and did not demonstrate it on the spot. Farah's first replication did not seem to be very successful, as her control of the salt and pepper was not very good. However, the mother and daughter were still very satisfied with this dinner. Half a pot of porridge was finished, and there were only a few dried chilies left in the 2 portions of potatoes. Farah had completed her first cooking show. It wasn't perfect, but she was satisfied with it. "Oh, my God, my child, the shredded potatoes you made are too delicious. It's almost on par with your father's cooking." Inside a simple stone house, a skinny middle-aged woman was looking at Beck, who was sitting across from her. The chopsticks in her hand were trembling because of her excitement. And on the table in front of them, there was a portion of sour and spicy shredded potatoes that did not look very good. The thickness of the shredded potatoes was not uniform enough, and it should be because the heat was overheated. The originally long shredded potatoes had become small strips of different lengths, and they broke with a pinch. However, this still could not stop the woman's excitement. Beck, who was originally a little depressed, raised his head and looked at the woman in surprise. "Mother, do you think these shredded potatoes are delicious?" "Yes, this is the most delicious food I've ever eaten. It's sour and spicy. It's simply too delicious." His mother smiled and nodded. She picked up another shredded potato with her chopsticks and put it into her mouth. Then, she quickly ate 2 mouthfuls of rice and swallowed it before continuing, "It's really too appetizing." Beck took a bite skeptically. The sour taste was a little strong, and the spicy taste was even stronger. The moment he took a bite, he almost burst into tears. He hurriedly ate 2 mouthfuls of rice to suppress the taste. This was a completely different dish from the sour and spicy shredded potatoes made by Sensei Meg when he was in school. However, just as his mother said, the taste was a little strong, but it was indeed too appetizing. "Mother, the difference between my cooking and Sensei's is huge." Beck put down his chopsticks and was a little depressed and disappointed. "Silly child, this is the first time you've made this dish. It's already very good that you can make it like this." His mother put down her chopsticks and gently reached out to pat Beck's head. She smiled and said, "I haven't eaten your teacher's sour and spicy shredded potatoes, but I think your sour and spicy shredded potatoes are really delicious. It's better than any of the dishes I've made." Beck looked at his mother and a smile appeared on his face. He nodded and said, "Yes, I'll definitely make it better and better. Of course, we still have a bag of potatoes. We'll eat sour and spicy shredded potatoes every night in the future." His mother nodded with a smile. "Mother, can you tell me more about Father? How did he become a chef in the first place?" "Your father back then, after Meg used the sour and spicy shredded potatoes in his teaching class, he released this cheap new dish in the restaurant that night. It was a new addition to the vegetarian menu. Today's new dish, sour and spicy shredded potatoes, 108 renminbi per serving. It's been a long time since a new dish with such a low price appeared. I feel like I could try it with my eyes closed. It's sour and spicy. Blind guessing is a good dish to go with the meal. Here comes the good news for gluttons." Looking at the small blackboard hanging at the door, the customers were already discussing among themselves. "Boss, why is such a delicious sour and spicy shredded potato only 108 renminbi?" Yabamiya ate the shredded potatoes and looked at Meg with a puzzled expression. The girls all looked at Meg. This price was indeed a little different from the price of the other dishes on the menu. The price is set according to the ingredients and the difficulty of cooking. I've always been very reasonable in my pricing. This is the price that should be, Meg said calmly. Each serving of sour and spicy shredded potatoes required 2 potatoes, 3 chili peppers, half a spoonful of vinegar, 4 cloves of garlic, 12 peppers, and a little oil. The cooking method was simple and efficient, so the price of 108 renminbi was very reasonable. "I also want a bowl of rice." Amy put down her empty bowl and blinked. "You want an extra bowl today?" Meg took the bowl with a smile and went to get some rice. Yes. Today's shredded potatoes are so delicious. I want an extra bowl." Amy nodded her little head. I also want another bowl." Little Guai put down his bowl as well. There were still 2 grains of rice on his cheeks. Chapter 2384. The sour and spicy shredded potatoes were sold at a relatively low price. Everyone praised it and asked for another bowl of sour and spicy shredded potatoes. They sold a lot of food tonight, but the turnover decreased because of the low price of the sour and spicy shredded potatoes. Meg didn't care much about this. He didn't rely on the restaurant's turnover to survive. As long as the customers were happy, he would feel comfortable. The best ingredients are the cornerstone of top-notch delicacies. It is also the cornerstone to bring the restaurant to the next level. New mission, host, please develop a delicacy with a price of more than 10,000 copper coins. Mission time limit, 7 days. After completion, there will be a generous reward. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. Top-notch delicacies use the most common ingredients and simple cooking methods to create food that everyone likes. Meg curled his lips and said disdainfully in his heart, "System, you must think that selling potatoes won't make money, so you issued this mission, right? Nonsense. This system is not that kind of system. A delicacy with a price of 10,000 copper coins is comparable to Buddha jumps over the wall. Wouldn't it be like sea cucumber, abalone? Meg curled his lips. These things will make me a lot of money, right? Vulgar. The system said seriously, as a proper system, this system always sells food at fair prices. I don't cheat anyone. A proper system is not selling food. Then. The system choked and said forcefully, this system is doing this to maintain the operation of the farm and ranch. I have no choice. Do you know how much it costs to raise a lobster? Do you know how many steps it takes to grow a shiitake mushroom? Meg curled his lips and said, okay. I'm tired of listening to you. Isn't it just food that costs 10,000 copper coins? I can roast a whole pig and it won't even cost 10,000. System. Roasting a whole pig is a bit exaggerated. How about roasting a suckling pig? It'll be smaller and easier to handle, Meg said after thinking. Meg had become more and more proficient in barbecuing recently. He had some ideas and confidence in barbecuing something big. Roast suckling pig was the signature dish of Dukas restaurant. Meg did not have a good impression of the restaurant, so he did not feel too guilty about smashing their reputation. The price of pork has increased recently. Piglets are more expensive because of their mother. 2,000 copper coins for one. The system quickly replied. Meg's brows furrowed as he asked, African swine fever is also spreading on the Norland continent. Every little piglet is a strong competitor for the position of pig king in the future. Every little suckling pig that is roasted means that there will be one less fat pig in this world that could originally grow up to 500 pounds. The price of 2,000 copper coins is already quite generous, the system said seriously. Pigs are everywhere. I can buy local pigs. The piglet provided by the system is a purebred wild boar king breed from the Twilight Forest. Its meat is firm and it's breastfed. It's incomparable to other piglets. It doesn't matter. It's a roasted suckling pig. It's even better if it's fatter. You don't need to brush it with oil. Meg remained unmoved. Then what's the difference between you and Dukas restaurant? The same ingredients, similar cooking methods, but different chefs can make two completely different dishes. This is the best way to show a chef's ability, Meg said calmly. Now, even a local pig costs 2,000 copper coins. It was the system's turn to be calm. Ha! Are you crazy? Meg's brows furrowed. Pig rearing is still a new industry. It hasn't been promoted on a large scale. Breeding pigs are even rarer, so the price of piglets is generally higher. It doesn't matter. I can also choose to roast a whole lamb. A half-grown lamb only costs 1 or 2,000 copper coins, and a roast whole lamb is much more expensive than a roast suckling pig. Meg immediately changed his mind. He did not know much about piglets, but he knew the price of mutton. It was a very common meat in the market. You fickle man. The system said angrily. Meg could not be bothered with it. He bid farewell to the girls who had cleaned up the restaurant and returned to their dormitory. When he was closing the door, he suddenly remembered Camilla's invitation this afternoon. The night was dark and the wind was strong. The moonlight was enchanting, and there was a faint fragrance of flowers in the air. Spring was here, and it was the season for animals to reproduce again. Should I go? Or should I go? Meg pondered. The children had already been brought upstairs to sleep by Gina. They had been playing all night. They went upstairs to take a shower, and then fell asleep obediently. Irina said that she had something to do with the night elves, and she would be back later. I'm just going to have a heart-to-heart talk with the employees who have some mental problems. That's all, Meg mumbled to himself as he walked out the door, and walked towards the small forest in the northwest corner of Aiden Square. Just as Mag reached the small forest, he heard a series of screams of ecstasy and the sound of whips landing on flesh. I haven't even arrived yet, and it's already so exciting. Meg stopped in his tracks. He looked suspicious as he went into the small forest. Do you still dare to? I don't dare to. I don't dare to. Please spare me, great aunt, ha. Spare you. Wait until I'm not angry anymore. Smack. 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 Meg stood behind a tree and looked at the empty space in the small forest under the moonlight. Camilla, who was wearing tall leather boots, was stepping on a man in black. She was waving a small whip in her hand and whipping the man in black's body. This was not the kind of whipping that was seen in the movies. The 2-meter-long whip left a sharp mark in the air. The tail of the whip was like a poisonous snake, and it made a sonic boom as it lashed the air. Then, it landed on the man's body, and blood splattered everywhere. The man's screams were extremely tragic, especially when the whip landed between his legs. He screamed like a pig that was being castrated. Meg instinctively clamped his legs together, and hesitated whether he should go forward to stop this crazy woman. Camilla seemed to have known that Meg was coming, and the whip landed heavily on the man's back. The man groaned, and then went completely silent. Since you're here, why are you still hiding behind me? Camilla turned around and looked at Meg, who was standing behind the tree, with a faint smile. The full moon hung high in the sky, and the moonlight fell on Camilla's body. The tight black dress showed off her voluptuous figure perfectly, and the beautiful curves of her long legs that were so fair that they shone. The black high-heeled boots were the highlight. Her red lips were bright red, as if she had just sucked blood. Her cold eyes stared at Meg, and she spoke to him like a queen. How did he provoke you again? Meg walked out from behind the tree, and looked at the unconscious man in black. The night is dark, and there's no one around. Some stinky men always think that they have the chance to do some dirty things. Camilla smiled coldly, and the corner of her mouth was full of mockery. End of chapter. Chapter 2385. Meg understood after hearing that. Then the man in black lying on the ground did not deserve any pity. But, why are you looking at me like that? Meg looked at Camilla with a slight frown. Nothing, I just feel that this guy can't take a beating. I haven't had my fill yet. Camilla's lips curled up slightly as she looked at Meg with a playful gaze. You are clearly a masochist, why are you pretending to be a masochist? Meg curled his lips. Shut up. Camilla instantly exploded. Thinking back to that day when she was tied to the small bed, she felt even more humiliated and embarrassed. She said with a cold face, Did you bring the thing I asked for? What did you ask for? Meg had a puzzled expression. Didn't you ask me to come to the little forest? I thought you were going to show me some big treasure. Why are you being so mysterious? I am talking about all the photo stones. Camilla was so angry that her teeth were itching. The whip in her hand had already been raised unconsciously. Oh, you are talking about that. If you want it, just say it. If you don't say it, how would I know that you want it? Meg said with a helpless expression. Give it to me. Camilla stretched out her hand. I didn't bring it. Meg shrugged. Paw. The whip lashed out in the air and broke the trunk of a tree that was as thick as a bowl. Look at you, can't you just talk nicely? Why do you have to vent your anger on these flowers and plants? This is different from being a scumbag. If you break the whip, they will have to plant another one tomorrow. It will be so hard on the gardener. Meg said with a look of pity. Camilla pointed the whip at Meg and said angrily, Do you believe that I will really whip you? Meg said with a calm expression, That's good. Tomorrow, I will directly stop work and rest for a few days. If they ask, I will say that you failed to get the strange photo stones from me, so you whipped me as revenge. You shameless person. Camilla was so angry that she did not know whether to lash out or release the whip. She would never have thought that Meg, who looked so scholarly, would be so much harder to deal with than the hooligan lying on the ground. Actually, you don't have to worry about leaving the photo stone with me. At most, I'll just take it out to admire it in the dead of night, Meg comforted. You. The whip in Camilla's hand was already raised, but when she looked at Meg, she suddenly put down her hand and smiled. You have a wife now. Aren't you afraid that I will tell your wife about this? Meg pondered for a moment before a look of fear appeared on his face. Are you scared now? Your wife is a 10th-tier powerhouse. She can easily kill you with a wave of her hand. Camilla's smile was filled with pride. She felt that she had finally grasped Meg's weakness. I am indeed a little worried. After all, my wife has always been domineering and willful. If she sees the photo stone or knows about this, she will definitely think that you seduced me. Meg nodded with a serious expression. He looked at Camilla worriedly. If she goes crazy and wants to kill you, she can easily kill you with her strength. I really can't stop her. Camilla was confused. But you don't have to worry. I will make sure that she won't see the photo stone, and won't know that you asked me to come to the little forest. Meg patted her shoulder comfortingly before saying, if there's nothing else, I will go back first. Camilla was stunned when she saw that Meg was about to turn around and leave. Then, she came back to her senses. The plot seemed to be different from what she had imagined. She was the one who asked Meg out and wanted to use his wife to threaten him to compromise. How did it turn into her being threatened by him and wanting to work together with him? Wait. In this matter, I seem to be the victim, right? Camilla finally voiced her doubts. Look, the situation back then was like this. The little dark room, candles, leather whip, ropes, handcuffs, leather clothes, and the photo stone were all prepared for you, who was scantily clad. As for me, I was dressed neatly and was obviously an innocent man who was knocked unconscious and carried back. Who do you think is the victim? To put it bluntly, after I was kidnapped by you, in order to satisfy your masochistic fetish, I was forced to pick up the leather whip and whip you. And at that time, you seemed to be enjoying it and looking very excited. Isn't that reasonable? Meg said righteously. Camilla was speechless. How the fuck am I supposed to reason with? Just as Meg said, those things were all prepared for her, but they were all prepared for Meg. Who would have thought that he would turn the tables and use all of these things on her? Looking at her excited face in the image, Camilla slowly covered her face. This is too shameful. All right, then you have to work hard tomorrow. I'll go back first. Good night. Meg put away the photo stone and turned to walk out of the little forest. Camilla looked at Meg's back as the leather whip in her hand trembled slightly. In the end, she still whipped the man in black beside her. Scumbag. The man in black was speechless. The next morning, the old man who was cleaning the place found a half-naked man who was severely injured in the little forest. His back was filled with whip marks, and if one looked closely, they could still vaguely make out the word scumbag. He was quickly carried away by the Grey Temple's patrollers. The news came back that he was a repeat offender with a record of indecent assault. His arms and legs were broken, and even his third leg was broken. Hearing that he was fine, everyone was relieved. The way he used the whip is quite artistic. Irina smiled and turned to look at Meg. What do you think? Normal people don't have such interesting ideas. Meg nodded calmly as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Actually, I know how to use a whip too. Irina's lips curled up, and a black leather whip appeared in her hand. Meg stared at the whip for a second before pointing to Ugly Duckling, who was sunbathing at the side, and saying, "You can use it to practice." Ugly Duckling, who was rolling around comfortably, turned around and looked at Meg in confusion. Irina kept the whip, and said with a serious expression, "According to the elven rules, when the queen is not on the throne for more than 100 days, the high priestess will replace the queen, followed by the princess. Now that the queen and Helena are in seclusion, the elves have not had a king for 100 days. According to the rules, Sally will be the queen temporarily." Meg's expression also became more serious. He looked at Irina, and asked, "Did something happen to the queen?" The queen was in seclusion. During this period, many important things happened in the elves and the Norland continent, but she never showed up. There were many rumors in the outside world. Some said that the elven queen had died from her old injuries, but the elves kept it a secret. "Mother is still alive. This is the only thing I can be sure of." Irina shook her head slightly. End of chapter. Chapter 2386. Ha ha ha. From tomorrow onwards, I will be the king of the Wind Forest. Arrogant laughter came from the castle in the Brewster family's territory. Elliot sat on the throne with a proud smile on his face. The elders of the Brewster family couldn't hide their excitement either. Sally Brewster would ascend the throne tomorrow and become the temporary queen of the elves. This news had already spread throughout the Brewster family's territory. No one knew if the queen was alive or dead. Helena was in seclusion. The Wind Forest would welcome a new queen. The status of the Brewster family would also rise. Sally was still a child. In the eyes of the elders, she was still a little girl who didn't know anything. Although she seemed to have shown some skills recently, she was still a child. There was only one Irina in this world. Sally was still far inferior to her. Therefore, it was now the Brewster family's turn to control the highest power in the Wind Forest. "Congratulations, Chief. You have a good daughter. The glory of the Brewster family will shine in your hands." Everyone raised their glasses and complimented him. They toasted each other and indulged in a life of luxury. Everyone was fantasizing that after tomorrow, the Brewster family would become the most powerful family in the Wind Forest and step on the heads of all elves. Elliot was surrounded by people. It was as if he had become an emperor who had ascended the throne. Everyone was celebrating, including the young ones who didn't have the right to enter the castle. No one noticed that a group of black-armored soldiers had quietly surrounded the Brewster family's territory. The encirclement was shrinking, and all warnings were erased before they could be issued. Just like that, the black-armored soldiers surrounded the castle. A magic barrier rose and covered the castle. Only then did the laughter in the castle gradually stop. The castle gate slowly opened. What's going on? The elders of the Brewster family looked at the black-armored soldiers with swords and sabers outside the door with their mouths wide open. The Black Iron Guards were the Queen's personal guards. A personal guard formed by elite elves who were only loyal to the Queen. The Black Iron Guards represented the Queen's will. If any elves disobeyed or resisted the Black Iron Guard's orders, they would be deemed as traitors and killed on the spot. "You guys, don't you know where you are? How dare you surround the territory of the future queen?" Elliot walked up from the crowd and scolded arrogantly. "Elliot, we are under orders from Princess Sally to arrest you for threatening the safety of the elves." The leader of the Black Iron Guard stepped forward and flashed an arrest warrant. As soon as he finished speaking, two black figures flew out from the group and grabbed Elliot from the left and right. The black spirit binding rope also instantly tied him up. Elliot, who was drunk, only came back to his senses when his spirit energy was restrained. He shouted angrily, "Let me go! I'm Sally's father. The Queen's father. You can't arrest me. Patriarch. The members of the Brewster family were also shocked. They all took out their weapons and magic staffs. The atmosphere was tense. The leader of the Black Iron Guards glanced at them coldly and said, "The Black Iron Guards are handling this case. Anyone who dares to resist will be punished as traitors and can be killed on the spot." All the elves' expressions changed when they heard that. After some hesitation, someone took the lead and threw away their weapons. Like dominoes, they all surrendered. A mocking smile appeared on the leader's face. Princess Sally was the only one with integrity in such a big family. Stop shouting. The Black Iron Guards are now under the command of Princess Sally. Of course, after tomorrow, he will be the queen. The leader looked at Elliot with a sharp gaze and said, "We have received reliable evidence that you are trying to control the queen to achieve your goal of controlling the Wind Forest. If you are convicted of this crime, you will repent in jail for the rest of your life." Elliot's expression changed drastically. He exclaimed, You are framing me. I am her father. She can't do this to me." The leader raised his hand and said coldly, "Gag him and take him away." A ball of black cloth was stuffed into Elliot's mouth. 2 Black Iron Guards carried him and stuffed him into the prison carriage. "As for you." The leader looked at the terrified elves and said, "From today onwards, the territory of the Brewster family will be locked down indefinitely. You are not allowed to leave for any reason until Her Majesty gives the order to lift the seal." The Black Iron Guards left, but there was an extra troop stationed outside the territory. A spell formation quickly rose and covered the territory of the Brewster family. The Brewster family members were stunned by the sudden change of joy and sorrow. They just couldn't understand how they had suddenly become prisoners when they were just about to become relatives of the Emperor and rise to the top. What was even more frightening was that their leader was captured. As Sally's father, Elliot had just made a vow to become the man who controlled the Wind Forest. Now, he was arrested for endangering the safety of the elves. Sally hadn't even taken the throne yet, but her first action was to punish her family for justice. It was true that she had a filial son. The news of the Brewster family's territory being destroyed and Elliot being arrested quickly spread throughout the Wind Forest. Sally's actions on the eve of her coronation made all the major families' hair stand on end. In most elves' minds, although Sally was chosen by Helena as the new elven princess and replaced Irina's position, she was only an obedient tool. Just when everyone thought that Helena wouldn't come out and that Sally was weak and incompetent, Elliot would take control of the elven race's peak power by controlling Sally. However, she decided to put righteousness before family. What surprised all the elves even more was that the Black Iron Guards, who were loyal to the Queen, had already pledged their loyalty to Sally on the eve of her coronation. The Black Iron Guards were the best of the best in the elven army. The leader and deputy leader were both 10th-tier powerhouses. They only listened to the Queen. Even the High Priest couldn't command them. On the eve of her coronation, they used their actions to show their loyalty to Aunt Sally. This made the forces that had been scheming against Sally re-evaluate the impact of this news. The Wind Forest was destined to not be peaceful tonight. Apart from the Brewster family, 2 other major families were raided by the Black Iron Guards. The leaders and the main members of the family were taken away for treason. Their territories were also sealed, and no one was allowed to enter or leave. A tall figure in black armor stood outside the cave and said respectfully, "Princess, the net has been closed. No one escaped. Thank you for your hard work." Sally's voice came from the cave, and then there was no more. That elf in black armor stood outside the cave for a while and then left silently. "Since it's already rotten to the bone, I can only cut the bone to heal it." After a long time, a soft sigh came from the cave. Thank you for your hard work. Another weak voice sounded. Chapter 2387. Tisk, TSK, TSK. Sally is really something. She actually has such ruthless means. I've underestimated her. Irina, who received an urgent letter the next morning, sat up from her bed and exclaimed in shock. What's wrong? Meg leaned over to look at the letter in Irina's hand, and his eyes widened. There wasn't much information, but it wasn't a small matter. On the eve of Sally's coronation, she arrested Elliot and raided the houses of two powerful families at the same time. The new queen hadn't even ascended to the throne yet, but she had already burned the three most unstable elements. The timing was ingenious, the means were sharp, and the decision was decisive. It was amazing. I wanted to go and support her today, but it seems like there's no need for that now. Irina threw the letter in her hand away, and it turned into golden spots of light in the air. Then, she fell back onto the soft and comfortable bed. Then, I'll go back to sleep. Go ahead and sleep. I'll get up and prepare breakfast. I'll go out for a while. Meg got up and got dressed. Where are you going? Rodu, Meg answered. Going to the opera again. I promised to bring them to the opera previously, and I'm going to fulfill it today. Meg nodded. Miss Black Cat had been popular out of the circle recently. It had even reached Chaos City. Because the situation on the continent was stable, many rich families had already taken their flying steeds to Rodu to watch this opera. The ladies had seen the picture books, and were looking forward to this story. Then I'm not going. Irina yawned and turned around. It's more interesting for me to watch the coronation later. With that, Meg was a little tempted. He had watched the opera a few times, and he would get sick of it no matter how good it was. However, the elves' coronation was different. With the elves' long lifespan, it was not surprising that they would only see it once in 100 years. Then, why don't I discuss with them later and see which one they want to watch? Up to you, Irina answered lazily. The restaurant wasn't open today, but because of Meg's travel plans, the girls still came to the restaurant early in the morning. Going on a tour and building a team was the most interesting thing. This was the consensus that the girls had reached. The destination of this trip was Rodu, where they were going to watch Miss Black Cat live. As the first batch of loyal fans of the manga, there was no doubt that the girls were looking forward to watching the opera live in person. Even Camilla, who had yet to recover from the shame of last night, came. Yabamiya took a bite of the soup dumpling and asked Meg worriedly, "Boss, will we be able to make it to the show if we leave now?" "If we set off for Rodu now, we'll only be able to watch the afternoon show," Meg said. "If that's the case, then we can only watch 2 matches. What a pity," Yabamiya said regretfully. "I heard that Angela is studying in that theater now. We won't see her perform on stage, will we?" Barbara frowned. "That would be a good show. I'm not sure." Meg was also stunned. He hadn't paid attention to Angela's situation for a while. He didn't know how she was doing with Vicky's acting lessons. However, given Angela's personality, she probably wouldn't be idle. Moreover, the atmosphere of the Black Cat song troupe was good, and they were often understaffed. They probably used Angela a long time ago. "Oh, yes. I just heard a piece of news this morning, so there's an extra option for today's itinerary. The elven race will be holding a coronation ceremony today, and Sally will be registered as the elven queen. Should we go and watch Miss Black Cat or the ceremony?" Meg asked everyone. The restaurant was silent for a while. "Of course we're going to watch Sally's coronation." Yabamiya stood up immediately, and said agitatedly, "Sally is going to be the queen. We should definitely be there. I agree. Barbara raised her hand. I agree too. Shirley nodded. We can watch the opera next time, but if we miss the Elven Queen's coronation ceremony, we might not be able to see it again in this lifetime. Hannah raised her hand. The ladies voted without any suspense. The trip to Rodu to watch the opera was cancelled, and they were going to the Wind Forest to watch the Queen's coronation ceremony instead. Did you all receive the invitation? The Wind Forest is not a scenic spot that anyone can visit, Camilla said, pursing her lips. Phyllis nodded and said, the Wind Forest is very strictly guarded. For such a grand event, they wouldn't let outsiders in. That's a problem. Meg pondered. If he wanted to go alone, no one would be able to stop him. However, there were more than 10 people in the restaurant now. It was a big target, and there were all kinds of races. Without an invitation, it wouldn't be easy to sneak in. This is my invitation, but I can't go. You can have it. Irina took out a green token and casually threw it on the table. Lady Boss, why do you have an invitation? Yabamiya asked in surprise. When you're strong enough, you'll naturally be invited. Irina smiled. I see. Yabamiya was deep in thought, and her admiration for Irina increased. Meg knew that this wasn't an invitation, but a high-level token that allowed them to enter and exit the Wind Forest. Since Irina threw it out, they could naturally enter. As for Irina, she obviously planned to attend the ceremony with her own identity. Amy put down her bowl of porridge and looked at Meg seriously, and asked, if Big Sister Sally becomes the queen, will she be able to protect me? It shouldn't be a problem if we're in the Wind Forest, Meg said with a smile. Big Sister Shirley, Big Sister Sally is a good person. If she becomes the queen, will we be able to live in the Wind Forest? Anna asked Shirley. Shirley was silent for a while, and shook her head slightly. I'm not sure yet. A good person can't change a race. Don't worry. Sally will definitely change, Meg comforted with a smile. Sally's series of actions last night impressed Meg. At the same time, he was also looking forward to the transformation of the Wind Forest and the Elven race. Let's go if you're full. We have to get to the Wind Forest before the ceremony starts. It'll be a pity if we miss it. Meg stood up and walked to the door. The frost dragon rose from the city, and flew toward the northeast. As a 9th-tier frost dragon, Elizabeth's flying speed was much faster than normal flying mounts. About an hour later, the silhouette of the Wind Forest appeared in the distance. The lush primeval forest stretched for thousands of miles. Go down. Or just go in directly? Elizabeth asked. Fly in from the side. It's too troublesome to interrogate bit by bit, Meg said. Chapter 2388. The coronation ceremony of the Elven Queen was the most important ceremony of the Elven race. However, this coronation ceremony was a little special. The elves did not send out invitations to the public. Therefore, when Meg and the others arrived at the center of the Wind Forest, they could already see the majestic Tree of Life, but they were stopped. Hundreds of arrows were already aimed at them, and the black armored guards surrounded them. Irina is too unreliable. Meg complained in his mind. He thought Irina was really confident that they could sneak in and watch the ceremony quietly in a corner. He didn't expect that. She didn't even send out invitations to the public. What was the point of them coming here with fake passes? Elizabeth and Camilla looked around cautiously, thinking about which direction to break in from. They could already see that there was something wrong with the pass. The others were still naive, thinking that this was just a routine check. Sister Sally doesn't know we're coming. Or did she tell them to come and greet us? Amy asked in confusion. Meg smiled awkwardly. The fact that these black armored guards didn't directly attack a group of unidentified people who suddenly appeared in the center of their territory and tried to sneak into the Queen's coronation ceremony was already very polite. "Where did you get this pass from?" an elf who looked like the captain asked coldly as he looked at Meg. This young elf had the strength of a 7th-tier elf. He looked at Meg and the others with caution. This group of people was too strange. The leader was a human male. Other than that, there was a giant dragon, a demon, an orc, and 3 children. He couldn't tell how strong that man was, but those women gave him a lot of pressure. He was already considered outstanding and powerful among the younger generation of elves. However, he couldn't see through the strength of these women at all. They were too powerful, far more powerful than him. Especially the woman who was standing at the back of the group with a little girl in her arms. Although she was holding back her aura, just a little of it was enough to make him feel a terrifying pressure. A 10th-tier powerhouse. A 10th-tier powerhouse with a few 8th-tier and 9th-tier powerhouses had unknowingly arrived outside the area of the ceremony. He had already ordered someone to report to the commander immediately. The leader in charge of the internal security should be here soon. As for why he didn't attack this group of people, other than his lack of strength, it was also because of the pass token in his hand. This was the highest level of entry token in the elven race. Only the queen, the high priestess, and the princess had it. He did not sense any strong hostility from this group of people. Moreover, if one insisted that they were here to ruin the ceremony, this combination would seem a little too casual. Of the 3 children, the oldest was a 5 or 6-year-old elf who looked like he had just started learning magic. That little half-elf girl is so cute. What kind of bad intentions could a 3 or 4-year-old girl have? And the little being in his arms looked like he had just learned to walk. Moreover, apart from those powerhouses, the demon girl with horns on her head also looked quite weak. There was also a human woman with no magical aura at all. From the looks of it, they really seemed to be here to observe the ceremony. Meg looked at that elf and thought about how to answer his question. It didn't seem appropriate to say that it was Irina. After all, this was the coronation ceremony of the new queen. If Irina hadn't left, she should be the one to ascend the throne today. It also didn't seem appropriate to say that it was Sally. After all, they hadn't rehearsed with Sally. If they didn't match, they would be taken down as spies or get into a fight on the spot. Wouldn't that ruin her plans? At this moment, a series of footsteps came from behind. The black-armored soldiers made a path. An elf with a long sword at his waist strode over and stood in front of everyone. "Commander." The elf captain's eyes lit up. He quickly stepped forward and presented the pass in his hand. This group of unidentified people are trying to enter the ceremony with the pass. Meg recognized the commander of the Black Iron Guards, Bennett. The Black Iron Guards were loyal to Her Majesty the Queen. They were the Queen's personal guards, formed by the elites of the elves. As the leader of the Black Iron Guards, Bennett was a 10th-tier swordsman. He was one of the few powerhouses in close combat among the elves. He had participated in the northern expedition against the skeleton army. Bennett took the pass, but didn't rush to check its authenticity. His gaze landed on Meg and the others, and he revealed a puzzled expression. The people who came weren't nobodies. At least, Bennett recognized a few of them. There was the princess of the Moon Nation, Barbara, who had contributed greatly in the battle with the devils. There was also the new leader of the vampire tribe, Camilla, who had been in the limelight recently. There was also the 10th-tier powerhouse who was standing behind the crowd and carrying a child. He also looked familiar. Although he couldn't recall his name, he should be from Lantist. His aura was similar to theirs. "Commander, should we arrest them?" the captain asked. Bennett raised his hand and gestured for him to step back. He looked at the pass in his hand. It was genuine. There were only 3 of these passes in the elven race. However, what most elves didn't know was that Princess Sally didn't have one. Therefore, this pass should have come from Irina. What are your motives for coming here? Who sent you? Bennett's right hand gripped the hilt of his sword. The coronation ceremony was imminent. If Irina came to cause trouble, he had to react in time. It's big sister Sally. We are here to observe her coronation ceremony. Uncle, please bring us in, Amy answered quickly, looking at Bennett innocently. Half-elf. Bennett looked at Amy, and his eyes widened. 7th tier. The magic waves in this 4-year-old half-elf's body had already reached the 7th tier. It's her. A name flashed across his mind. The news of Crassus and Julian taking in a prodigy disciple had already spread across the Norland continent. Furthermore, the 2 of them had joined forces to fight the demonized Rankster, proving once again that they were still the best magic casters on the Norland continent. The captain's face turned cold, and he scolded, "How dare you? The Queen's name is actually, shut up." Bennett coldly cut him off. The captain's voice stopped abruptly. He looked at Bennett, and then at Amy. He only closed his mouth after a long while. There were many people in this world that couldn't be offended, and the youngest of them should be this little fellow in front of him. Bennett knew that even if it was a one-on-one battle, this little captain under his command might not be a match for her. Bennett threw the pass to Meg, and said in a low voice, "We didn't invite anyone to this coronation ceremony. Everyone, please go back. I was the one who invited them." Right at this moment, a cold voice sounded. End of chapter. Chapter 2389. Your Highness. The iron-armored guards parted to the sides, opening up a path. Sally, dressed in a long silver robe with gold trimmings, walked over under the protection of the guards. Her every movement was full of the aura of a queen. "Sister Sally, you're so beautiful today." Amy's eyes were sparkling as she waved her little hands at Sally. "You're really beautiful." Yabamiya also had the expression of a little fangirl. Meg looked at Sally and also smiled. Who would have thought that the young girl who had been loitering outside the restaurant would become the queen of the elves? "Your Highness." Bennett bowed slightly in greeting. The dark iron guard knelt down on one knee and bowed respectfully. Sally stopped beside Bennett and looked at Meg and the others with eyes full of surprise. Her lips curled up slightly, but she quickly stopped and maintained her aloof queen demeanor. She said in a cool voice, "These are my friends. Bring them to the best seats for the ceremony." "Yes." Although Bennett had his suspicions, he didn't hesitate at all when it came to Sally's orders and acknowledged respectfully. Sally nodded slightly at Meg and the others, then turned and walked towards the door. She had thought that this would be a boring ceremony because the people she cared about wouldn't be present. Who would have thought that they would all be here? No one dared to look at her directly, so no one noticed the slight smile on her lips. Bennett looked at Meg and the others. Although he didn't know how they had become the princess friends, since the princess had given her orders, he would do as she said. Bring the guests to the viewing platform and choose the best seats. Bennett ordered the captain, then cupped his hands at Meg and the others. Sorry for the offense. He turned and left with Sally's guards. The elven captain looked a bit awkward. He was the one who had stopped them and had just said that he would arrest them, but the queen had slapped him in the face personally. These people in front of him really were the queen's friends. And from the way that little girl addressed them, they seemed to be on good terms. This way please. The captain tried his best to squeeze out a smile as he led Meg and the others forward. The coronation ceremony was held in front of the Tree of Life, the holy tree of the elves. There was an ancient altar and solemn elves. Only the branches of the Tree of Life that swayed gently in the wind looked a little naughty. Seated on the viewing platform were the elven elders. This time, they were not arranged according to their status, but according to their age. The older the elves were arranged to sit in the front row. The young elves stood in the large square under the altar. Other than the elves guarding the border, almost all the elves had come to participate in this important ceremony. Regardless of their status, they stood on the square as equals, just like how their fathers stood here last time, watching the previous queen be crowned as a king. Meg's group entered the venue and immediately attracted countless gazes. Who are they? Didn't you say that there would be no outsiders? Human, giant dragon, demon, and half-elf. What kind of strange combination is this? Voices of confusion were heard. The elven captain led Meg and the others to the viewing platform. Meg did not choose the best spot in the center. Instead, he chose a corner where he could clearly see the altar. This was a celebration that belonged to the elven race. Their arrival was already a surprise, so they naturally couldn't go to the most conspicuous spot to attract attention. The captain's impression of Meg improved significantly. After arranging for everyone to sit down, he said, "If you need anything, please tell the staff over there." "Thank you." Meg nodded slightly and watched as the captain left. "That tree is so spectacular." Amy looked up at the Tree of Life in surprise. This is the Tree of Life, the holy tree of the elven race. It's also a tree with spiritual energy. Meg introduced with a smile. The Tree of Life was very close to Irina and had saved her many times. It had even endured the most difficult 3 years for her. "I think I saw it move just now." "It wasn't the kind that was blown by the wind," Anna said in surprise. The Tree of Life has spiritual energy. The elders of the race said that it was a holy tree that was personally planted by the Goddess of Life. The elven race established a connection with the Goddess of Life through it. Only an elf that has been acknowledged by it can become the queen of the elven race, Shirley said. Right at this moment, a branch of the Tree of Life suddenly rose up and flew toward the viewing platform. It was like a green ribbon flying toward Meg and the others. Everyone turned to look with confusion in their eyes. Why did the Tree of Life suddenly move? The branch grew quickly and finally stopped in front of Amy. The branch, which was as thin and soft as a willow branch, lightly touched Amy's head as if it was caressing her head. Hee, so ticklish. Amy laughed, but she didn't avoid it. A corolla appeared on the branch and gently placed itself on Amy's head. Then, it patted Amy's head lightly. Green light dots fell like flower petals, as if it was giving her blessings. The branch quickly shrank back and swayed gently with the wind as if it had done nothing. The elves looked at this scene with their mouths agape. The Tree of Life put a corolla on a half-elf and even gave her blessings. The Tree of Life had a spiritual energy, but not all elves could be acknowledged and blessed by it. In the past 100 years, only Irina and Sally had been acknowledged and blessed by the Tree of Life. And now, this little half-elf girl who had come to the Wind Forest for the first time had been blessed by the Tree of Life. It must be the Tree of Life's blessing for a guest who came from afar. "This doesn't mean anything," an elder said. The elves all nodded in agreement. This was the only explanation that could make them feel better. "Beautiful, beautiful," little Gwai said as it clapped its little hands. "Little Amy is liked by the Tree of Life," Mia also said with a smile. Shirley, on the other hand, was a little surprised. Like the other elves present, she also knew what it meant to be acknowledged and blessed by the Tree of Life. Amy wasn't a pure elf. She had half-human blood in her. Why did the Tree of Life choose her? Unless it was because of the other half of her blood that the tree of life gave her special treatment? And that passed from before. She only remembered how precious it was after seeing it clearly. Since the lady boss didn't come from the wind forest, then she shouldn't have this pass. It could even be said that only a few people in this world could have this pass. A bold idea appeared in her mind. She looked at Amy. Those beautiful azure eyes were so familiar, and the sight of Amy's face made her see some overlapping contours. Then the boss. Shirley's eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 2390. Shirley looked at Meg, who was smiling gently as he hugged Amy. She was a little dazed. The thought that rose in her heart was too shocking, and she couldn't be sure for a moment. If Amy was the princess's daughter, then the boss would be Alex, that godlike man. But such a godlike man's daily routine was actually to open a shop, cook, and take care of a child. This was too different from the image of the man in her impression. It couldn't be described as cute anymore. It was simply terrifying. But when this thought rose in her heart, she felt that Amy was more and more similar to the princess. That pair of beautiful eyes, that silver hair, and the equally shocking magic talent. Another point was that ever since the lady boss appeared in the restaurant, the princess had never come to the restaurant for a meal again. Now it seemed that it wasn't that she didn't come, but that she had changed her identity and was eating in the restaurant openly as the lady boss. Thinking back to the cooperation between the boss and the night elves, as well as the series of actions, it seemed more reasonable. This. Shirley raised her eyebrows slightly. Her expression and emotions were a little complicated. Just then, Meg happened to turn around and look at her. Their eyes met, and Meg smiled gently before looking away. Shirley blushed and hurriedly looked away. Looks like she can still control her emotions after revisiting the old place. Meg thought to himself. He was originally a little worried that Shirley would be in a bad mood because of her father's murder. Elliot was captured by Sally, and no one knew where he was now. No one from the Brewster family would be present to watch the ceremony today. That child should be the disciple of Crassus and Julian, right? Her talent is indeed shocking. On the high platform, an elderly elf looked at Amy, who was wearing a flower crown, and said with a smile. She's even more stunning than Irina back then, an elder beside him also exclaimed. Did you find out who her mother is? There was no news before, but I heard that her mother came back recently. She's a young great magic caster, but no one knows her identity and past. It's a pity that she's a half-elf, an elf said regretfully. The elves fell silent. The most important thing for a race's inheritance was bloodline. Half-elves were destined to never become the queen of the elves, and they wouldn't even be recognized as a member of the elves. The commotion caused by the interaction between the Tree of Life and Amy soon subsided. Melodious music began to play, and the scene gradually quieted down. The coronation ceremony was about to begin. There were 100 white jade stairs leading to the altar. At the end of the white jade stairs, there was a straight path that was 5 meters wide. There were black iron guards standing a few meters apart on both sides of the path. In a moment, Sally would pass through this long path, walk up the white jade stairs, and ascend to the altar, where the coronation would be completed. As the music started, Sally appeared at the end of the long road surrounded by guards. The scene was solemn and quiet. All the elves looked at Sally. Today, she would be crowned as the Queen of the Elves. Is the princess not coming? Phyllis looked around. She had disguised herself today to avoid unnecessary trouble. Meg scanned the surroundings but did not find Irina. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he heard a commotion from the black iron guards. Purple-striped griffin. Someone exclaimed. Everyone looked up at the sky. A griffin shining with purple light swooped down. On the high platform, several 10th-tier elves had already stood up. They held their magic casters' staffs and wands almost at the same time. Meanwhile, the black iron guards inside and outside the venue were all at loggerheads. The atmosphere became tense all of a sudden. Irina led the night elves out of the wind forest, and they were currently enemies with the elves. Today was Sally's coronation ceremony. Were Alex and Irina here to cause trouble? Little Ozzy, why is it here? Amy murmured softly. Ugly Duckling, who was dozing off in her arms, suddenly opened its eyes. It arched its back slightly, and its fur stood on end. It let out a soft warning whimper. Stop it. It's not imposing at all. It's unpleasant to hear. Amy slapped Ugly Duckling's head. Meow, meow, Ugly Duckling immediately lost its imposing manner. It changed its position and nestled in her arms again. It's still here. Sally raised her head slightly and looked at the purple-striped griffin calmly. She didn't seem to be surprised at all, nor did she panic at all. No one was in a hurry to make a move. Everyone present knew that if these two really wanted to ruin today's coronation ceremony, no one would be able to stop them. Although they felt aggrieved, this was an ironclad fact. Even their greatest reliance, the Tree of Life, was waving its branches at the guests in the sky, appearing extremely enthusiastic and happy. The purple-striped griffin landed on the altar. Irina was the only one on its back. Irina, who was wearing a silver dress, walked down slowly from the griffin's back. She stood on the white jade altar, and reached out to touch the branches that were coiling around her intimately with a smile on her face. Go ahead, Irina said to the griffin. The purple-striped griffin flapped its wings and took off, circling in the sky above. All of the elves looked at Irina, who was standing on the altar. The branches of the Tree of Life revolved around her, making her appear even more holy and pure. The regal look on her face was innate, and even though there was no magic power seeping out of her body, her powerful aura struck awe and veneration in everyone's hearts. If those things hadn't happened, then the one standing on the white jade altar today should have been her, right? This was probably the thought that all the elves present couldn't help but think. Irina was the most powerful person among the younger generation. She was even in existence who could fight High Priestess Helena one-on-one without being at a disadvantage. She was once the pride of the elves, and had always been seen as the best candidate for queen. However, she had already betrayed the Wind Forest, and her princess status had been taken away by Chi now. She was even the enemy of the elves. Now that she had come to the ceremony and landed directly on the coronation altar, was she preparing to cause trouble? Irina, what do you mean by this? Bennett asked coldly with his sword in hand. Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble today. I'm here to attend Sally's coronation ceremony. Irina took 2 steps forward with a smile, and said, Mother is in seclusion, and Helena is also in hiding. Someone has to give their blessings to the new queen. I don't think you guys are qualified. The elven nobles only felt embarrassed, but they didn't dare to voice their anger. Irina's gaze leaped over the crowd and landed on Sally, who was at the end of the long path, and a smile appeared on her face. Sally looked at her, and a smile also appeared on her face. She started to walk step by step toward the white jade altar. Bennett stared at Irina for a long while before raising his hand to signal the black armored guards to put away their crossbows. The music started again. Sally walked up the white jade altar step by step. The two of them stood side by side like a perfect couple. Meg, why do I feel like something's not right? Chapter 2391. All of the elves had thought that this was going to be an intense meeting, but to their surprise, Irina and Sally didn't seem to be in the slightest. Instead, they looked more like a pair of sisters. Irina's aura was very powerful, but Sally wasn't suppressed by her. The queen and high priestess were in seclusion, so the coronation ceremony was supposed to be presided over by the elves. However, Irina was going to preside over the coronation ceremony for Sally. All of the elves wore peculiar expressions. Irina was powerful, but they didn't think it was appropriate for her to preside over the coronation ceremony. Irina looked at Sally and said, "These guys don't even know how to communicate with the Tree of Life. Mother isn't here, and Helena isn't coming out, so I can only preside over the coronation ceremony. You won't blame me for stealing your limelight, right?" Sally smiled and said, "I'm very happy that you could come today. The best thing that old witch Helena did in her life was to choose you as the princess." A smile also appeared on Irina's face as she looked at Sally with a hint of emotion in her heart. The timid little girl who liked to follow behind her had finally grown up, and she had become the one that she liked. The coronation ceremony begins now. Irina's voice reverberated throughout the entire plaza. "Worship the god of life." A silver light lit up on the white jade altar as soon as she finished speaking, and a white jade stone tablet that was 3 meters tall slowly rose up from the center. There was a blurry female figure engraved on the stone tablet, and there was a tree beside her. It was a towering tree, and its branches danced in the wind. Sally wiped the smile off her face, and her expression became solemn. She lifted the hem of her dress and crossed her arms in front of her. Then, she knelt on the white jade altar and kowtowed toward the stone tablet. All of the elves in the plaza and on the viewing platform knelt down and kowtowed toward the altar. "Anna, this is the god that we elves worship." Shirley and Anna also got up from their seats and kowtowed. Amy looked around, then turned to look at Meg and asked, "Father, should we bow to him?" Yabamiya and the others were also sitting uncomfortably. Fortunately, they were sitting in a corner, so they were not that conspicuous. "We don't need to worship. We don't believe in God." Meg smiled and shook his head. He was now a demigod and had even raised a god. It was strange for him to worship an illusory god. "Oh." Amy nodded and stopped moving. After 3 kowtows, the ceremony ended. Sally stood up. Then, all the spirits stood up. A silver pen suddenly appeared in Irina's hand. She walked forward and wrote Sally's name on the stone tablet. Looking closely, there were more than 10 names before Sally's name. They were all the names of the elven queens. After leaving her name on the stone tablet, a silver light shone from the stone tablet and disappeared between Sally's brows, leaving a silver crescent mark between her brows. "The goddess of life has acknowledged Sally," Shirley said softly. Meg looked at the stone tablet curiously. He wondered where the goddess of life was now. Had she already ascended, or was she trapped somewhere like the sea god, waiting for a chance to reincarnate? "Crown the holy tree and ascend to the throne." Irina's voice sounded again. The branches of the tree of life parted, and golden and green spots of light shone like stars in the sky, even overshadowing the light of the sun. A branch drooped down and took out a golden crown from the top of the stone tablet. The golden crown shone brightly under the sun. In the middle of the crown, there was a teardrop-shaped sapphire embedded. A holy aura emanated from the crown, making people want to bow down and worship it. "Is it a divine weapon?" Meg's eyes lit up as he felt an unusual aura from the crown. "A crown, it's so beautiful." Little Guy stared at the crown with sparkling eyes before turning to look at Meg. "I want it." "That won't do." Meg shook his head and looked at the trident in Little Guy's hair that was used as a hairpin. It was something left behind by the gods. Looking at the crown, the elves' expressions became even more pious and fanatical. The branch curled up the crown and slowly lowered it onto Sally's head before placing it on her head. The golden light enveloped her, and it was so dazzling that people instinctively looked away and didn't dare to look directly at her. Irina narrowed her eyes slightly as she looked at Sally with the crown on her head. She was in a daze for a moment. Ever since she could remember, everyone had told her that she would wear this crown and become the queen of the elven race. It was such a heavy thing that forced her to become stronger and break the records left behind by her predecessors. She didn't know when it started, but she suddenly hated this arrangement. Maybe it was when she saw that young man in the Magus Tower. Or maybe it was because there was no one else in the same generation who could fight. Or was it because of those disgusting rules and systems? That was why she ran away from home and escaped from the Wind Forest to travel all over the Norland continent. She was no longer the cold and noble princess of the elven race. She defeated all the magic casters in the world at the Magic Caster Tournament in Rodu and won first place. She tricked Dracula into organizing an exhibition of vampires eating grass on the Demon Islands and earned a huge sum of money. She brought Alex to rob the vault of the Golden Dragon Island and filled 12 space rings. She did many things that were considered unorthodox by the elven elders, but she became the idol of the younger generation. That was because she was so powerful that she became a legend at such a young age. She left behind a string of undefeated battle records, and she walked side by side with the most powerful man on the Norland continent. She didn't like this arrangement, and didn't think she could be a qualified queen. She thought she couldn't escape from the arrangement of fate, but she didn't expect Sally to replace her as the new princess, and now she was even crowned queen. Willow took out a golden scepter from the stone tablet, and handed it to Sally. Crown, scepter, the symbol of the elven queen's power. From this moment onwards, Sally was officially the queen of the elven race. With the crown on her head, Sally took a step forward, raised the golden scepter in her hand, and loudly said, "My people, the god of life blesses you. Queen! Your Majesty!" The elves began to cheer with fanatical and worshipful expressions. The branches of the tree of life swayed, and spots of green light scattered on the square and landed on the elves' bodies. The aura of life surged, and the spots of light merged into their bodies, healing all their hidden injuries and old illnesses. Irina looked at this scene with a smile, and slowly stepped back. She believed that Sally could do better than her, and bring a brighter future to the elven race. Chapter 2392. Sally was crowned king and blessed her people. She became the new queen of the elves amidst the cheers. Mag and the others also stood up to give their blessings and applause to Sally. From how Sally treated Elliot and the others before she ascended to the throne, Mag was certain that the elves would have a bright future. Under Sally's leadership, they would enter a new phase. But what were the elven queen and Helena doing? They were in seclusion and didn't even show up for such an important event like the queen's coronation. The coronation ceremony was about to come to an end. Next, the queen led all the elves to worship the goddess of life and ask for the protection of the elven race. Next, there were singing and dancing performances, which marked the official start of the ceremony. Sally gripped the scepter in her hand tightly. She felt the heavy weight. This was the responsibility of the entire elven race. The future of the entire race was now in her hands. Although she had prepared herself mentally, she still felt a lot of pressure when she put on the crown and held the scepter that symbolized power. She looked at the enthusiastic and trusting faces below her. However, when her gaze fell on the group of elves in the corner and saw the smiles and encouragement on their faces, she suddenly felt a lot of courage. Her gaze also became determined. "Congratulations, Your Majesty," Irina said with a smile. "Thank you." Sally nodded with sincerity and gratitude. Irina waved her hand and walked down the altar. The rest was up to Sally. As the queen, it was very important for her to lead her people through the first worship ceremony. Irina stepped down from the altar and onto the viewing platform. The elves sitting in the center all stood up and made room for her. Irina looked at them and chose a seat. Sister Irina is so cool. Yeah, she has such a strong aura and a big heart. She's so cool. The girls in the restaurant all turned into fangirls. Phyllis wasn't too surprised. The outside world seemed to be sad that the princess couldn't become the queen, but she knew that the princess never wanted to be the queen. The music sounded again, and 2 rows of elves presented freshly picked melons and fruits. They placed them on precious jade plates and placed them on the altar. Sally led all the elves and started the grand and complicated sacrificial ceremony. Meg and the others watched from the side with great interest. It was rare to see such a grand ceremony. Meg stared at the stone tablet on the white jade altar. While the elves were chanting and praying, there seemed to be a mysterious aura that was pulling strands of power towards the stone tablet. This is the power of faith. Meg raised his eyebrows and closed his eyes. Within the darkness, wisps of green-white gas appeared above the elf's head and flew towards the stone steel. Just as he thought, the god of life relied on the elves to constantly absorb the power of faith, and in return, she protected the elves to a certain extent. To a certain extent, this could be said to be a mutually beneficial transaction. Meg was gathering fans, teaching them how to cook, absorbing their power of faith, and condensing divinity. It was actually similar. The only difference was that the god of life provided healing and faith, while Meg provided cooking skills and cooking skills. Meg opened his eyes and sized up the stone tablet. But where is the god of life? Is she hiding in this stone tablet? It shouldn't be. This might be a medium to absorb the power of faith. Just then, the silver light on the stone tablet suddenly brightened. The dazzling light made Meg squint his eyes. The stone tablet seemed to be burning, and the light became brighter and brighter. This is. Meg's expression became serious because it seemed that other than him, no one else present felt this change, including Sally, who was closest to the stone tablet on the altar. She was still praying devoutly. Mama, the stone tablet is burning, little Guy said, pointing at the stone tablet. Shoo, little Guy, don't talk, Gina said softly beside her ear, grabbing her little finger. Little Guy can see it too, but Gina, who is already at level 10, can't see it. Meg leaned forward slightly. He noticed that Irina's expression didn't change. It seemed that she couldn't see the change in the stone tablet either. The burning was becoming more intense. It started from one point and had already spread to the top half of the stone tablet. It didn't seem to be accurate to say that it was burning. There was no flame, but a glaring light that kept spreading. Meg wasn't sure if this was a change or a normal occurrence during a sacrifice. After all, there weren't many occasions where the power of faith was concentrated on such a large scale. Then, he noticed that the tree of life behind the stone tablet suddenly started burning. Yes, it was burning for real this time. The silver flame appeared on a branch, and then quickly spread to countless branches. In the blink of an eye, it became a raging fire. This is. Sally, who had just completed the sacrifice, stared blankly at the burning tree of life in front of her. She was shocked and at a loss. The tree of life is burning. Put out the fire. The elves in the square were in a commotion. Their eyes were filled with shock. Irina abruptly stood up and was about to step in. This fire can't be put out. It should have something to do with the god of life, Meg transmitted his voice. Irina's wand-wielding hand paused. She looked at Meg. She's going to reincarnate. I'm not sure yet, but the flames are burning from the stone tablet. It seems to be some kind of sacrifice. Meg chose his words carefully. He saw the burning tree of life turn into streaks of green light and enter the stone tablet. It seemed to be carrying out some kind of inheritance. Is it a sacrifice? If that's the case, then it's really a bastard. Irina slowly clenched her fists. She looked at the burning tree of life. Your Majesty, this place is dangerous. Please leave with me first. Bennett appeared on the altar, and brought Sally to the viewing platform. They were very close to Irina. The powerful elven beings had already gathered here. Sally had already ascended to the throne, so her safety was very important. The silver flame spread extremely quickly. It wasn't just the branches. The branches were also burning from the inside out. The tree of life, which was hundreds of meters tall, was burning fiercely. The flames shot up into the sky. All the elves looked at this scene in shock and fear. They didn't know why the tree of life, which had protected the elves for thousands of years, would suddenly burn. Gina, if anything happens later, you have to protect everyone, Meg transmitted his voice to Gina. Gina nodded in agreement. Meg felt a little uneasy. It seemed like something was about to happen. This wasn't a good omen. Something that could make him feel threatened was probably beyond the range of a 10th tier ability. Chapter 2393. The tree of life was burning fiercely, but what everyone couldn't see was that the stone tablet in the center of the white jade altar was much brighter than the tree of life. However, after absorbing the energy of the tree of life, streaks of green light appeared on the stone tablet. They spread over the stone tablet like a net, and looked like some kind of ancient runes. It looked very mysterious. What's going on? Irina transmitted her voice to Meg. The tree of life is burning for the stone tablet. It's not right to call it a sacrifice. It's more like some kind of inheritance. The energy accumulated by the tree of life for thousands of years was all transferred into the stone tablet. However, you guys can't see this process. Only Xiao Guai and I can see it, Meg quickly explained. Irina frowned in deep thought. In her eyes, the stone tablet didn't change at all. It was just a little brighter because of the light. The tree of life had accumulated so much energy over thousands of years. Why did it choose to pass on this kind of inheritance today? And in the presence of so many people? The elves panicked. Some elves tried to use water-type magic to extinguish the fire, but all the magic failed before it could reach them, including 10th tier magic. Can we only watch it burn? Sally asked Irina. This might be God's will. We can't stop it. Irina shook her head. What bullshit God's will? If not for the fact that magic was ineffective, she wouldn't watch the tree of life burn to ashes. Sally pursed her lips. Since even Irina said so, there was no way to change this. She didn't expect the tree of life to burn on the day she ascended the throne. The burning of the tree of life was a big deal. Meg wondered if the former queen and Helena would come out to help. The fire didn't last for too long. After about 10 minutes, the fire stopped. No ashes were left, and no charcoal was left. The tree of life that was hundreds of meters tall completely disappeared in the fire, leaving only an empty pit. The buildings built around the tree of life seemed even more desolate now. The entire place was silent. Only the elves were crying softly. The symbol of the elven race seemed to have disappeared at this moment. Only Meg knew that the tree of life didn't disappear. It entered the stone tablet in another way. On the mural, the tree of life that the elven goddess was leaning against had turned green. It was bright and vibrant, as if it was alive. Wah! Right at this moment, a baby's cry broke the silence. At the top of the stele, countless green vines grew out and intertwined to form a cradle, supporting a baby girl as it slowly rose. The energy of the tree of life poured into the baby's body. The elves saw this scene, and their mouths were wide open. This is the divine infant. An elder from the elf tribe stammered. The reincarnation was successful. And Irina looked at the baby, and she was also a little dazed. The little thing was only a little bigger than when Amy was born, but she looked like she was carved from jade. Her eyes hadn't opened yet, but her little pointy ears were extremely adorable. For some reason, she felt a strong sense of intimacy when she looked at the little thing. The tree of life is burning. The divine infant has been reincarnated. The goddess of life has reappeared, an old elf yelled. The elves finally came to their senses, and they also fell into a frenzy. They looked at the baby on the stone tablet with feverish expressions and knelt down in worship. What should we do now? Sally was dumbstruck for a moment before turning to Irina. You're the queen, so you should be the one to carry the baby down. This is a child bestowed by God, Irina replied. Sally nodded and walked down the viewing platform toward the altar. Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A black hole suddenly appeared in the sky, and a huge figure appeared. It was a strange creature that looked to be at least 100 meters tall. It had 6 hairy legs like a spider, and its body was similar to that of a forest troll. It was thick and full of sharp spikes. What was even stranger was that it had 3 heads and 6 arms. It was like a monster that had been randomly pieced together. Meg was familiar with this structure. A great old one. Meg stood up, and his expression became serious. At the same time, a black ray of light shot out and flew toward the baby on the stone tablet. Intruder! Bennett yelled, and almost at the same time, he unsheathed his sword. His figure suddenly flashed, and he held the sword with both hands as he slashed at the black ray of light. The sword was very fast. At the very least, it could be ranked in the top 3 among the swordsmen that Meg had seen. However, that black ray of light was very cunning. When the sword slashed at the black ray of light, it was only an illusion. Almost at the same time, a capsule-shaped metal cabin appeared beside the stone tablet. The cabin door opened, and the baby was locked inside along with the baby. Stop him! The elven powerhouses present attacked almost at the same time. Some tried to stop the metal cabin, while others started to attack the intruder. However, after the metal cabin took away the baby, it disappeared with a flash of black light. When it reappeared, it was already in the monster's hand. It really is the divine infant. A sharp, ear-piercing laugh came from the monster's mouth. It's spatial magic. This monster is very strong, Barbara said seriously. I'm afraid we have to run. If we can't win, we'll run. There's nothing embarrassing about that. Let's go. Meg stood up and led the way. Everyone. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and run. Meg carried Amy and jumped over the railing at the side to leave. Let's go. This is indeed not a battle that we can participate in. Barbara also stood up and ran. She had a deep memory of the battle in the north. Against such a monster, level 8 and level 9 beings would be nothing but food. Meg took Amy's group and ran away. His priority was to ensure the absolute safety of his own people, followed by the divine infant. He was still not sure whether that guy was a great old one or not. There was no obvious magic power, but his appearance was somewhat similar. His energy level was indeed above level 10. The elven powerhouses were all present, including Irina. Meg believed that they could hold on for a while. Moreover, the elven queen and Helena should not be able to hide anymore, right? I'm taking this child away. You can't stop me. The monster's sharp voice was full of mockery. Space began to distort, and a black hole appeared, about to cover it. "Put down the child." At this moment, a cold shout was heard. The black hole that had yet to form collapsed instantly. Chapter 2394. The black hole collapsed, and the monster fell from the sky. However, it rolled on the ground, still holding onto the metal cabin tightly. At the same time, an elf appeared on the altar with a magic caster's staff in her hand. She pointed it at the monster and said coldly, "Did you not understand what I said?" Her regal aura and domineering aura were all indicative of her status. "Queen! Your Majesty!" All the elves were in an uproar as they stared fervently at the queen in a gorgeous dress standing on the altar. The queen, who had been in seclusion for several months, finally appeared when the divine infant was snatched away. "Your Majesty!" Sally was also looking at the queen with surprise. "Mother!" Irina, who was about to attack, stopped in her tracks. However, she furrowed her brows as she looked at the queen. "I'm afraid you're not qualified." The monster cackled. A door suddenly opened in its chest and swallowed the metal cabin containing the female infant. It then opened its mouth and spat out 2 fireballs at the queen. "Mother, be careful. Its magic has spatial attributes," Irina reminded. As soon as she said that, the fireballs that the monster had just spat out disappeared. In the next second, they appeared on the altar with the queen in the middle. Then, they exploded. Boom! A mushroom cloud rose up, and the deafening sound of the explosion was deafening. The elves standing in the front row of the plaza were flipped over, and many of them were injured. What a powerful magic attack! The elven powerhouse's eyelids twitched violently. The power of these 2 magic balls, which seemed ordinary, was no less than a full power attack from a magic caster. Her Majesty, all the elves looked at the altar worriedly. They didn't know if the queen could withstand such a powerful magic attack. Furthermore, it was so sudden and confusing. The flames dissipated, and the white jade altar was unscathed. However, the queen was nowhere to be seen. "This is the Wind Forest. What right do you have to behave so atrociously?" The elven queen stepped out of the void and raised her magic caster's staff above her head. She said coldly, "Holy light, annihilation." A golden holy light lit up from the blue gem at the top of the magic caster's staff. It instantly traversed space and pierced through the monster's heart. A hole that was several meters wide appeared in the monster's chest. Both ends of the hole were penetrated. Interesting. Lowering his head to look at his chest, he let out an ear-piercing laugh. Suddenly, he patted his chest to erase the hole. At the same time, black ripples appeared around his body and spread out in all directions. "My attack is ineffective." The queen frowned. The wound on the monster's chest had already healed, but his aura had not weakened at all. Just as she was distracted, the black ripples had already enveloped her. She wanted to retreat, but when she activated her spatial magic, it was as if she had fallen into a swamp. She was unable to step into the void. Domain? What a troublesome fellow. The queen frowned. "You want to run now? It's too late." The monster laughed. Its huge mouth opened and a huge fireball began to condense. "Stars, fall." A cold voice sounded. A starry sky suddenly appeared above the monster's head. Dozens of stars fell from the sky and turned into meteors. They suddenly appeared above the domain and smashed towards the monster. "It's the High Priest." The elves, who were already several hundred meters away, looked up at the starry sky with elation on their faces. The void restriction was not easy to break from the inside, but it was easier to break from the outside. Dozens of meteors fell. The huge energy wave destroyed the no-fly domain of the monster and fell straight towards the monster. Holy light, sweep away all the filth. At the same time, Irina, who was standing on the viewing platform, raised the magic caster's staff in her hand. A ray of holy light shot out and instantly pierced through the monster's middle head. Although the monster tilted his head, half of his head was still directly cut off by the holy light. However, the cut-off head did not explode. Instead, it showed a metallic luster. How interesting! The monster's right head suddenly turned towards Irina and grinned. As soon as he finished speaking, his 6 arms suddenly waved. Like a huge paddle, they directly slapped at the meteors that were wrapped in flames. Bang! The huge meteorite was directly smashed into a sky full of fireworks by his huge palm. Bang bang bang! In the blink of an eye, dozens of meteors were all slapped away by him. Some of them landed in the crowd of elves, killing and injuring many elves. However, that monster was not hurt at all. Organize the elves to evacuate from this place. Irina and Sally communicated through voice transmission as they looked at that monster seriously. All right. Sally nodded, and quickly left. A battle of this level was not something she could participate in. Her priority was to minimize the casualties of her elves as much as possible. Helena appeared on the altar with the water sphere in her hand. She also looked at that monster with a serious expression. This fellow was too powerful. It had not even displayed its full power, but it was already giving them immense pressure. A casual attack was the power of a 10th tier full power attack. It directly hit Irina and the Queen's attacks, but it was unable to cause any substantial damage to it. Its terrifying physical body that could slap away the meteors and the fearsome power of its magic were really a headache. What kind of monster was this? A demon? It did not seem like one. But when did such a strange race appear on the Norland continent? However, this fellow had snatched the divine baby away. There was no way they could let it go. The 3 of you are not bad. However, you are still far from being able to keep me here. The monster shook his head. His 3 heads stared at the 3 elves with a cold gaze, and said, I am going to leave now. If you stop me, I will kill all those ants. He was pointing at the elves who were retreating in a panic. Who do you think you are? How dare you threaten my people in front of me? Crawl. The Queen slammed her magic caster's staff on the ground. Beams of light suddenly lit up in the wind forest, and converged in the sky above the capital city. A golden spell formation descended from the sky like an inverted bowl, and trapped that monster, the Queen, and Helena inside. Do you think this can trap me? The monster sneered. He suddenly accelerated, and crashed into the nearest wall of light. Bam! There was a dull thud. The wall of light did not budge. The monster's face was pressed against the wall of light, and it was slightly deformed. Silence, it's all right. As long as I kill the 2 of you, I don't believe it can continue to trap me. The monster turned to look at the Queen and Helena, and grinned, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. In the next instant, it appeared in front of Helena. Its 6 giant hands all came swatting down toward her as if she were a fly. The terrifying power even caused the space to distort. Shifting stars. Helena chanted silently. The 6 palms came down, and a spatial rift even appeared in the center. However, when the monster opened its palm, there was only a pile of stone fragments in its palm. It looked up, and Helena appeared in the starry sky above. There was 1 star missing. I will destroy all your stars. Let's see where you can run to. The monster pulled out a black staff that was over 100 meters long from somewhere, and swept it toward the starry sky above its head. The stars in the sky were like lamps of different sizes, and they were all annihilated by the monster's iron staff. Helena swam between the stars, and dodged the monster's attacks. She looked a little disheveled. The queen's light magic was dazzling, but it didn't cause much substantial damage to the monster's body. Irina looked at Helena, who had been forced into a corner, and hesitated for a moment before flying into the spell formation with her wand. "I will smash your dog head." Irina appeared above the monster's head, and the tip of her magic caster's staff shone with golden light. She suddenly smashed it toward the monster's head that had been sliced in half. Bam! The magic spell exploded at close range, and the remaining half of the monster's head was instantly blasted into smithereens. "You damned woman!" The monster let out a furious roar, and grabbed at the top of its head with its 2 hands. Irina tapped her feet lightly, and nimbly dodged the monster's huge hands. She slid behind the monster, and stabbed the tip of her magic caster's staff toward its back. It had swallowed the divine infant at this exact spot. She had to rescue the divine infant first. Dong! The magic caster's staff stabbed into the monster's body, but it was as if it had stabbed into a metal wall. Irina felt her hand go numb. She couldn't pierce through it. What kind of monster is this? Irina was shocked. Just as she was in a daze, a huge hand slapped toward her from behind. Although she put her magic caster's staff in front of her in time, she was still sent flying by the slap. She crashed into the ground 100 meters away, creating a deep crater. Irina. The queen's expression changed slightly. "Mother Empress, I'm fine." Irina stood up with one hand on the ground, and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. "This guy's body is very hard. It's even harder than its head." The 10th tier elven powerhouses also joined the battle at this moment. However, their magic attacks were like tickles to the monster's body. Apart from restricting its movements to a certain extent, they couldn't do any substantial damage to it at all. After sending Amy and the others to a safe place, Meg turned around and saw Irina's battle. While he was furious, he also looked at the monster with a hint of bewilderment. This monster was indeed very powerful, but it was also very strange. To be precise, it didn't seem to be made of flesh and blood. Whether it was the attack that the queen pierced its chest or the head that exploded in the middle, there wasn't any blood or liquid that looked like blood. On the contrary, the head that was slowly recovering had a silver-black metallic luster. Meg even saw some exposed parts. This seemed to be a mecha. It wasn't a devil, nor did it look like a creature native to the Norland continent. High-precision machinery, powerful strength. Meg took out his communicator and sent a message to She. Then, he fixed an image recording stone on a tree at the side, facing the direction of the spell formation. "Amy, you have to protect everyone. I'm going to help your mother." Meg patted Amy's head gently and left silently. The people in the restaurant who were anxiously concerned about the battle did not notice Meg leaving. Other than Shirley, who had been paying attention to Meg to see when he would make a move, noticed Meg leaving immediately. For some reason, she, who was originally nervous, suddenly felt a lot more relaxed. Was Alex, that godlike man, finally going to make a move? What should we do? Princess Irina and the others don't seem to be able to defeat it. Should we go and help? Yabamiya asked worriedly. A level 10 attack isn't very effective against it. There's no point for us to participate in the battle. Elizabeth shook her head. She looked at the monster and thought for a while before pressing down on an ice crystal in her hand. She, who was writing in her diary, received a message from Meg. The message was very short, but it made her stand up from her chair immediately. A mecha monster has appeared in the Wind Forest. It's suspected to be from the Buried City. Its strength is above level 10. Come quickly. Who the hell is it that came all the way here? What a troublemaker. She strode to the cockpit, and the spaceship took off in the direction of the wind forest. With Meg's strength, if he determined that it was above level 10, she wasn't sure if she could handle it. She might even need to ask for help from the buried city. Irina smashed one of the monster's heads. It slowed down its movements, but it wasn't much of a hindrance. Magic rained down on it, but other than bursting into pieces, it couldn't hurt its body at all. What scared the elves even more was its speed. Even if spatial magic was restricted in the formation, its 6 spider legs that were dozens of meters long still provided it with terrifying speed and flexibility. Bang! A mage was swept by one of the monster's legs and flew out of the formation as if he was hit by a heavy truck. His waist and abdomen caved in, and he vomited blood and fainted. In the blink of an eye, the 6 level 10 elves who participated in the battle were defeated one by one. All of them were knocked out of the formation with injuries, and one of them was crushed into meat paste. Only Irina, the queen, and Helena were left on the battlefield. Now, it's your turn. The monster turned its head to look at Helena, who was standing in the void. It jumped up with a sinister smile and swung its iron staff at the last star while one of its hands reached for Helena. Black hole, annihilation. Helena raised the crystal ball in her hand and chanted loudly. A black light lit up in the crystal ball, and then it collapsed and was annihilated instantly. The space began to distort as if there was a terrifying suction force. Even the surrounding light was distorted. The star above Helena's head was destroyed by the iron staff, but the hand that reached for her was swallowed by the black hole instantly. For the first time, the monster's face was filled with sarcasm and panic. Its body suddenly turned, and it fell downwards. The hand that reached into the black hole was swallowed directly, and even a piece of its body was swallowed. The metal and parts fell outside, but they were quickly shrouded by the black fog. The black hole was annihilated the moment it appeared. Without the support of the starry sky domain, Helena fell from the sky with a pale face. The queen caught her and retreated to the edge of the formation. Very well. Now, I've decided to kill all of you, the monster said coldly. The monster said in a cold voice. Dozens of holes appeared on its body, from which cannons poked out. Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world will continue to be updated in the hand-fighting bar. There are no advertisements on the website. Please bookmark and recommend the hand-fighting bar. If you like Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world, please bookmark it. Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world, the hand-fighting bar updates the fastest. Chapter 2395. The ghastly cannon barrel glowed with black and gold light. Irina felt an unprecedented sense of danger. She felt as if her aura had been locked onto, and she couldn't escape. Irina, help Sally look after our forest. Also, you must protect the divine infant. That's the reincarnation of the goddess of life. The queen's voice sounded in Irina's ears. In the next instant, a golden teleportation portal lit up under her feet. Queen Mother. Irina was shocked. However, a golden light flashed in front of her, and she had already appeared outside the portal 1,000 meters away. This time, it's still up to us to protect our forest and our people. The queen looked at Helena with a smile. Okay, I'll accompany you. Helena held her hand, just like the promise they made 800 years ago on the battlefield that was filled with devastation. The two of them looked at the monster and raised their magic caster's staffs and crystal balls. Go to hell. The monster roared angrily. Countless tongues of fire shot out from the cannon barrel, turning into blazing fireballs that blasted in all directions. The queen and Helena, who bore the brunt of the attack, received preferential treatment. Back then, I was the one who beat the evil demon clan to the ground here. How dare you, a collection of ugly people, shout here? How noisy! The queen's cold voice sounded. A black hole suddenly appeared in front of the dozens of fireballs that flew toward them. The fireballs were swallowed by the black hole before they could explode. The other fireballs landed on the golden barrier, and the barrier shook violently. The light dimmed significantly, and the ground was scorched. The queen slammed her magic caster's staff into the ground. Green light instantly covered the magic caster's staff. The lower end started to take root, and the upper end started to sprout. Bam! Countless vines and branches suddenly appeared from underground. Like a huge net, they suddenly tightened around the monster. Insignificant tricks. The monster waved its 5 arms, and the vines that wrapped around it were broken. However, there were many vines, and from bottom to top, they surrounded it from all directions. The vines that wrapped around it tied it up like a mummy. Burn, useless vines. The monster's deep voice rang out, and the vines that bound him began to burn fiercely, turning into ashes in the blink of an eye. However, just as he regained his vision, a crimson crystal ball appeared less than a meter in front of him. "This is?" the monster asked. The crystal ball suddenly accelerated and rushed into his mouth. "Star core, explode!" Helena yelled. Boom! With a deafening boom, the right side of the monster's head was blasted into scrap metal, and its body was sent flying several hundred meters away. It crashed into the array, and its 2 spider legs were deformed and twisted. "Damned woman, you're finished!" The monster shouted ferociously and disappeared. Be careful. The queen instantly unleashed a teleportation spell formation, wanting to teleport Helena away. However, in the next moment, the monster appeared in front of her. It lifted one of its spider legs and slashed at her like a death god's scythe. "You didn't expect me to kill you first, did you?" The face of the monster's last head was filled with a cunning grin. It seemed to have already seen the scene of this noble woman's head being chopped off. The elven queen's head was a very good collectible. If it was placed in the black market, it should be able to fetch a good price, right? It was just nice to use it to repair the damage this time. "Your Majesty." Helena, who was already in a defensive posture, saw this scene, and her expression changed drastically. She had already used up all her strength and was unable to provide support at all. "Mother Empress!" Luna exclaimed. The magic caster's staff in her hand had already lit up, but it was probably too late. "Your Majesty!" The elves looked at this scene in horror. The queen had already fought to her limit, but she still couldn't defeat that monster. Moreover, was she going to be killed by it now? That beautiful elven queen, will she die? Amy asked softly. "No, she will definitely make it." Shirley clenched her fists. She was nervous, but she was strangely confident. Just then, a shadow cut through space and passed by the moment that the sharp claws touched the queen. Ding! The sharp claws broke with a sound, and fell straight to the ground in front of the queen. A sharp sound broke through the air, and a white mark was left in the air that didn't disappear for a long time. The monster was shocked and looked at its sharp claws that had been cut off in disbelief. The queen was stunned. Light lit up under her feet, and she appeared hundreds of meters away. Helena's heart was in her throat, and she only swallowed it back down after a while. Only then did everyone see clearly that there was a black long sword floating in the sky. The heavy sword had no edge, but it made people feel that it was sharp. "Tian-Du sword. Alex is here!" Someone exclaimed in surprise and joy. "I say, old lady, leave this to me. You can all rest now." A man wearing a mask appeared outside the barrier and said in a lazy voice, "Who are you calling an old lady?" Helena was furious. "If it had killed you just now, I would have waited for it to finish before making a move." "What a pity, what a pity." Meg stepped into the spell formation and strolled leisurely, but there was a hint of seriousness in his voice. That was the truth. Meg could have made a move long ago. However, it felt pretty good to see Helena and his cheap mother-in-law being beaten up. Back when he was in trouble, these two were one of the instigators. At the very least, they were deeply involved. However, he really couldn't bear to watch Irina's mother be killed. "Little guy, you're very arrogant." The monster stared at Meg, but there was a hint of caution in its eyes that wasn't there before. "You're the one who's really arrogant to talk to me in such a state." Meg looked up at the monster that was more than 100 meters tall and shook his head. "I don't like to talk to people with my head up. Why don't you come down?" As soon as he said that, the Tian-Du sword that was hovering in mid-air suddenly accelerated and turned into an afterimage. It slashed down at the monster from top to bottom. The monster's reaction wasn't slow. It held the black iron rod with both hands horizontally, trying to block the sharp sword. However, the iron rod that was more than 3 meters in diameter didn't even have any effect on the Tian-Du sword. The iron rod broke, and the long sword continued to slash down. The monster's expression changed. Its remaining 3 hands slapped toward the middle, trying to catch the sword with its bare hands. Ding! The sword landed in the 3 hands. They caught it, but the terrifying force on the sword caused the monster's remaining 3 spider legs to bend instantly. It lost its balance, and fell forward while twisting. Bam! There was a muffled sound, and dust flew up. The arrogant monster that was more than 100 meters tall was now crawling in front of Meg in humiliation. "See, this is much more comfortable." Meg nodded with satisfaction. He reached out, and the Tian-Du sword appeared in his hand. Everyone present was watching this scene with their mouths wide open. The monster that was fighting the High Priestess, the Queen, Irina, and all the 10th-tier powerhouses of the elves was slashed to the ground by Alex in 2 moves. How terrifying was his power! There were rumors all over the continent that Alex might have entered the legendary godly realm, and become the one and only god on the Norland continent. However, no one knew how powerful a god was. They felt despair from that monster earlier, but now, they felt an insurmountable gap from Alex. How did this fellow become so powerful? Helena also couldn't hide the shock in her eyes. Although this monster was already severely injured by their combined attacks, he didn't use his full strength in that casual attack just now. Is this the godly realm? The Queen looked at Meg with a complicated gaze. This fellow still can't change that bad habit. Irina held her forehead with her hand. Why didn't she feel proud at all? The monster is defeated. So powerful. Uncle Alex is super powerful. Amy jumped up in surprise. Papa is so powerful. Little Guy clapped her hands too. Gina quickly reached out to cover the little one's mouth. She was a little surprised. How did little Guy tell? He's still getting stronger. Elizabeth stared at Mag with a fervent look in her eyes. How astonishing! He was already standing at the pinnacle of the Norland continent, but he was still becoming more powerful. He was stronger than the first time she saw him. He was stronger than the time he saved her from Frost Dragon Island. He was also stronger than the time in the Arctic ice fields. She could feel his power every time she saw him. This was what she was after. It's really him. Shirley looked at Meg in surprise. Although no one could see through his disguise, and his identity was even harder to associate. The only flaw was that he couldn't be the restaurant owner and the savior at the same time. No one noticed that dozens of miles away, on a battleship half hidden in the void, she released her finger that was on the trigger of the heavy sniper rifle. She pursed her lips and said, "Did this fellow let me watch him show off?" However, when she looked at the monster on the virtual screen, her eyes narrowed again. The system had already started to analyze quickly. This fellow that was packaged in the shape of a monster was indeed not a living creature. To be precise, it was an alien mecha. Whether it was the materials used in this mecha or the high-level manufacturing process, they were all not available on the Norland continent. This was indeed a product from the underground city, and its technology was even better than any of the current military's combat mecha. She had never heard of anyone who could enter the extraordinary level with a mecha, even if it was only half a step in. Which force is it? What's the purpose of breaking through the barrier and coming here? She frowned. She opened the emergency contact interface, and after hesitating for a while, she still chose to close it. She needed more information before reporting to the marshal directly. This matter was probably not that simple. Who are you?" The monster's voice was trembling. At this moment, he finally felt fear. This fellow's ability was far beyond what a 10th tier could compare to. However, all the information he collected said that no one on the Norland continent could break through 10th tier and become an extraordinary for thousands of years. Then, what was up with this fellow's ability? Me? I'm just a nobody. Meg grinned, but his voice was much colder all of a sudden. However, you just hit my wife. This is very bad. Choose how you want to die. You're underestimating me. The monster sneered. He supported himself with all 5 hands and stood upside down. Using his hands as his legs, his 3 sharp claws instantly turned into sharp weapons and slashed at Meg. I didn't know there was such a way to play. Interesting. Meg's feet moved slightly. He only moved in a small space, but he accurately dodged all of the monster's attacks. He was quite interested in the design of this mecha. It was much better than Vicky's mecha, and its ability was completely compatible with a demigod. If the Queen and Helena had not used all their strength to severely injure it, he would not have been able to deal with it so easily. But where was the controller hiding? Or was it a drone that could be controlled remotely? This fellow knows spatial magic. Save that baby first. Don't let him run away. Irina's voice sounded in his ear. Yes, my dear wife. Meg smiled, and his gaze became sharp. All right, game over. Remember, don't provoke the people from the Norland continent, Meg said coldly. He tapped his feet, and his body suddenly rose up. 3 black claws pierced toward him like lightning. Green light flowed around them. They should have been smeared with poison. Meg held his sword in one hand, placed it in front of his chest, and slashed it down. The 3 claws were sliced off by the sword, and became 3 pieces of scrap metal that fell to the ground. The monster used 2 of its hands to support its body, and the other 3 hands were trying to grab Meg. Meg tapped his feet lightly on the monster's giant hands, and used the momentum to climb up. The bigger the body, the slower the speed. This was in accordance with Newton's third law. So, Meg was much faster than him. Meg reached the monster's chest. He drew a sword flower with his long sword, and then kicked over. Bam! A metal pod was kicked out from the other end. Damn it! The monster was shocked, and one of its hands reached for the metal pod. However, Meg also appeared behind it. Before the giant hand could touch the metal pod, the long sword in his hand had already slashed down. The giant hand that was several meters wide was severed at the wrist. Meg kicked the metal pod again, and made it change direction. It flew toward the viewing platform. No! The monster roared. It turned around and wanted to chase after the metal pod. Today, I want to see how many bowls of powder you have eaten, Meg said with a smile. The long sword in his hand suddenly pierced into the monster's chest, and then suddenly swung upwards. This sword directly pierced through the monster's body, and then cut it into two. There were no organs, no powder, only a stomach full of parts and wiring. I'm gone. Don't live either. The monster made a final sound. A red light suddenly lit up where its heart was. So what if you're dead? You still talk so much nonsense. Meg walked over. 1 kick, 2 kicks, 3 kicks. The red light went out. Nothing happened. Daddy's restaurant in an alternate world will continue to be updated in the bar. There are no advertisements in the website. Please bookmark and recommend the bar. Daddy's restaurant in an alternate world, please bookmark. Daddy's restaurant in an alternate world. Chapter 2396. The entire place was silent. Everyone looked at the monster under Meg's foot that was completely motionless. Apart from being shocked, their faces were also filled with the joy of surviving a calamity. At this moment, everyone was looking at Meg with gratitude and fanatical worship. This man was simply too powerful. A monster that could withstand the attack of a 10th-tier powerhouse couldn't even last 10 moves under his sword. Master Alex is too powerful. He is so compatible with big sister Irina, Yabamiya said enviously. Elizabeth was silent. She looked at Irina with a hint of challenge in her eyes. Even if he didn't become a god, no one on the Norland continent is a match for him anymore. Not even Rankster. Helena looked at Meg with a pale face as blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Unless he's a real god. The queen looked at the metal pod that Irina was hugging horizontally with a helpless smile. It's a pity that we won't be able to see it. Now, it doesn't seem as bad as I thought. Helena forced a smile on her face as she looked at Irina meaningfully. Her Majesty is right. No matter whether she agrees with us or not, she will still protect the elven race. That fellow doesn't seem to be alive. The queen's gaze landed on the monster's remains with a puzzled expression. Is it a puppet technique? But how can there be such a powerful puppet in this world? Or is it an existence like the devil in the Arctic? Helena furrowed her brows. No, it doesn't have any demonic aura on it either. The holy light didn't bring any additional effects other than penetrating it. The queen shook her head. Meg lifted his foot and looked at the core that he had stomped on. It was a pity that this was a mecha that was controlled remotely, and the operator wasn't in the mecha. However, his eyes lit up again as he looked at the remains of the mecha on the ground. This fellow was equipped with hundreds of cannons. He reckoned that it had a lot of ammunition, and it should have many interesting high-tech technologies on it. Keep it. With a wave of his hand, Meg collected the 100-meter-tall monster's remains. At this moment, he even regretted his decision to split it in half. If it could be repaired, it would be a great help. This guy is really violent. She's eyelids twitched as she watched Meg slash the monster in half and stomp on its core. Compared to last month in the icy plains of the extreme north, he seemed to have become even stronger. What was even more frightening was that Meg had not relied on any mecha or external objects. Using the purest physical strength and combat techniques, as well as his comprehension of the laws, he had displayed an awe-inspiring combat strength. Sitting in the warship command room and looking at the figure on the screen, she even felt the pressure. She even felt that even with the help of the battleship, if she were to face Meg head-on, without enough space and distance, she would quickly lose. A continent civilization that had been monitored and looked down upon by the dungeon had a terrifying existence. If the video of the battle was sent back, it would probably be a high-level world. Also, who is that child? Why would someone from the dungeon risk being wanted and punished to cross the barrier between the two worlds just to steal her? She zoomed in on the metal container in Irina's hands. The holy light cut the metal container and the baby girl was carried out. So cute. Even she could not help but let out a gasp of surprise when she saw that chubby little face up close. It was a 3-month-old elven baby. She seemed to be still asleep with her eyes closed. Even the intense battle from before did not wake her up. Other than that, she did not see anything special about her. However, judging from the expressions of Irina and the surrounding elves, this baby should have a very high status. Perhaps she was the daughter of an important elf. Meg put away his long sword and glanced at the Queen and Helena. His eyes narrowed slightly. The condition of these two was worse than he expected. They were like lamps that had run out of oil and were lifeless. Irina held the divine baby and looked at her peaceful sleeping face. She could not help but smile. She looked up at the Queen and was about to speak. Irina, the Queen Mother is sorry, but please help me take care of this forest and this child. The Queen said with a smile. A golden light lit up from her fingertips and began to dissipate. Queen Mother. Irina was shocked and tears started to flow out of her eyes. Your Majesty. The elves looked at this scene and understood something. They started to cry. Don't be sad, child. I lived and died for the elves. My only regret is what I did to you. I hope you can forgive me, the Queen said apologetically. Irina pursed her lips and kept quiet. My people, please follow your new king and establish a new order. Remember, you are elves who will always be free. The Queen spread her arms, and her voice spread to every corner of the wind forest. I will give you my blessings. Golden light suddenly flashed, and specks of light scattered on the elves' bodies. Golden halos lit up on their bodies. In the crater left behind by the burning of the Tree of Life, a small sapling appeared, emerald green and glistening. Your Majesty. The elves all knelt down on one knee and cried. I don't ask for your forgiveness, but I admit that I made a foolish decision back then. Helena looked at Irina calmly. Her gaze fell on the child in her arms, and her eyes became reverent. Please protect her. This is the future of the elven race. They are the future of the elven race. Irina looked down at all of the elves kneeling on the ground, and a mocking smile appeared on her face as she said, and this is just a child who doesn't know anything. You guys always like to put things on children that they shouldn't have to bear. Helena was dazed for a moment, and then a relieved smile appeared on her face. Sally, do it. This time, no one will stop you. Helena looked at Sally and finished her last sentence. After saying that, she also turned into a streak of black and gold light and completely disappeared. In the crater, there was a small vine beside the small tree. It was gently draped over the tree. Sally stood among the elves in a daze. She clenched her fists, and her gaze gradually became firm. At this moment, her responsibility seemed to have become heavier. On this day, the divine infant was born, and the elves lost their queen and high priestess. Amidst everyone's cries, the baby woke up from her deep sleep. She looked at Irina with a pair of light golden eyes, and she opened her arms in a very affectionate manner. Chapter 2397. The little fellow was so small that she felt soft in her arms. She opened her little hands and looked as if she wanted to get close to her. Irina was forcefully pulled out of her grief, and she was at a loss for what to do. She had almost never taken care of a child before. Amy was taken away not long after she was born, and when they met again, she was already an obedient and sensible baby. She did not have the slightest bit of experience in dealing with such an immature little fellow who did not know how to speak and wanted to get close to her just by being close to her. The little fellow, who had opened his little hands, did not get a response from Irina. His little mouth immediately pouted, and he looked a little aggrieved. There were even tears glistening in his watery eyes as if he would cry at any moment. Don't cry. Irina hurriedly shook her head and hugged her tightly. She reached out and gently patted the little girl's head. She often saw Meg patting Amy and Xiao Guai's heads. The little ones seemed to like being patted on the head. The little girl rubbed her soft chest and then enjoyed Irina's touch. She smiled comfortably. It was the taste of warmth. Irina looked at the little girl who had suddenly become obedient, and her heart softened. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but she still couldn't help but look at Meg. He should be able to take good care of her, right? Meg came to the viewing platform and looked at the little girl in Irina's arms. He asked in a low voice, "What should we do with this child?" The little girl looked up at Meg and bared her teeth at him. Oh, she only had 4 baby teeth, so she wasn't fierce at all. Instead, she was a little cute. She's quite cute. Meg couldn't help but pinch her little face. 2 faint red marks were immediately left on her tender, snow-white face. The little girl immediately retracted her teeth and looked at Irina. She was about to cry, and she looked as if she had been wronged. Irina didn't spoil her. Instead, she looked at Meg and asked, "That monster, what's its background?" "It should be from the buried city." "It's not a monster, but a machine that's being remotely controlled." "It's similar to the dwarves' mechanical arts," Meg said telepathically. Irina's expression turned solemn as she replied, "Didn't you say that the underground city has nothing to do with us? Why would they send people to kidnap this child? Moreover, was the dungeon's mechanical engineering that powerful? To actually be able to create such a mechanical puppet whose strength far surpasses that of the 10th level. The peace between the 2 worlds is built on the basis of one being strong and one being weak. The gods have begun to reincarnate, and if they can grow into real gods again, then this balance will be broken. If the Norland continent had enough gods, would they lead the Norland continent to invade the underground city and fight for the chance to become a god? If you were the decision-maker of the dungeon, what would you do to prevent this from happening? Meg's voice was low, and his heart was heavy. Irina pursed her lips and was silent for a while. If that's the case, we can either take away these reincarnated gods who have yet to become gods or kill them. It's obvious that someone in the underground city already knows about the reincarnation of the god general. That's why they could appear here immediately. Meg sighed. Whether it was in terms of power or information, they could not compare to the underground city. This was going to be difficult. Of course. The dungeon's mechanical engineering is not common to be able to achieve this level. This should be an extremely rare existence. Meg shook his head. The cost of this mecha was probably much higher than Xi's battleship. I intend to go to this child later. There's no one in the Wind Forest who can protect her, Irina said calmly to Meg, but her gaze was exceptionally determined. Meg nodded after a brief moment of contemplation. He turned to look at Sally, who was making her way over to him, and murmured, "I wonder what Sally is thinking." Sally came closer, and bowed slightly to Meg. She gratefully said, "Mr. Alex, thank you for your help in resolving the crisis for the elves." "You're welcome, Your Majesty." Meg nodded slightly and retreated to the side. Sally looked at Irina with reddened eyes. "My condolences, Your Highness. I'm fine. However, I'm afraid you'll have to deal with the remaining mess for a while." Irina sighed softly. Looking at the trees and vines leaning against each other in the deep pit, she felt that the grief in her heart seemed to have lessened. This child. Sally looked at the child in Irina's arms. I intend to take her away, Irina said to her. Then I'll have to trouble you to protect her. Sally nodded and bowed to her again. The elves tried their best and lost the queen and the high priestess, but they still almost failed to protect this child. The current elves were too weak to protect this child. Just as the queen entrusted this child to Irina, at least Alex could protect her. No one knew when that strange and powerful existence would come again. Irina nodded slightly and looked at Sally expectantly. Then, I'll leave the elves to you. When this place regains its former freedom, the night elves who are willing to come back will come back. I will. Sally nodded. Meg whistled. Howl, a long howl sounded from afar. Meg and Irina boarded the griffin and flew away. All right, you can teleport me back now. Meg sat on the griffin and looked at Irina. Are you tired of playing two roles at the same time? Irina asked with a smile. It's all right. There's also a strange superhuman feeling. Light flashed, and Meg returned to the battlefield. Phew, what an intense battle. Alex is too powerful. He's our role model. Meg walked out from the room next door. Ha! Boss, where did you go? Yabamiya asked Meg. Everyone also looked at him. During the battle just now, he didn't seem to have much of a presence. Shirley looked at Meg with a strange expression. Where did he go? He was the man who attacked the monster. I was watching the battle next door. The view there is wider. You were too engrossed, so I didn't call you. Meg found an excuse and said, I think we should go back. The elves are in trouble, and will only cause trouble for Sally if we stay here. Since we have nothing to do today, why don't we stay here and help? I saw many people injured, and there are many things that need to be rebuilt and cleaned up, Yabamiya suggested. I agree, Elizabeth said. Me too. Amy raised her hand. Everyone agreed with this suggestion. In that case, let's get moving. Meg nodded and didn't insist on leaving. Chapter 2398. The ladies helped to clean up the battlefield and treat the injured. Meg was just a bystander with the physique of a normal person. His communicator vibrated. Meg took it out in a secluded place and connected to She. Mr. Meg, that monster is indeed from the underground city. I need to retrieve it and report it to the higher-ups to confirm its origin, she said directly. Miss She, according to the rules of the Norland continent, I killed this monster. As a trophy, it belongs to me now. Meg smiled. Of course, I can give you the monster's core to report back to the higher-ups. In exchange, you have to give me a new core. She was silent for a while before saying, Mr. Meg, you're indeed a businessman. I helped you take care of a border crosser that was close to the supernatural level and prevented the Elven massacre from attracting attention and investigation. Shouldn't you pay me some compensation? Meg asked again. The observer's duty doesn't include arresting border crossers. I only need to report this to the higher-ups, and the law enforcement team will take care of it. Everything else has nothing to do with me, she said calmly. Then you're really dutiful. Meg's intention to extort a sum of money fell through. You want a new core? Are you trying to reassemble this mecha? With the Norland continent's mechanical standards, you can't restart it even if you get a new core. You don't have to worry about that. I can just set it up as a cannon stand in front of my house. It'll still look majestic. According to the rules, I need to bring it back to the underground city to destroy it. Mr. Meg, please hand it over to me. She's voice became more forceful. Interesting. That's the rules of the underground city. What does it have to do with me? Meg laughed mockingly. Could it be that the underground city can't resist robbers who come to their door and have to send them out respectfully? She was silent for a while before saying as calmly as possible, Mr. Meg, our cooperation has been smooth so far. However, to ensure the independence and isolation of the underground city from the Norland continent, please cooperate. Actually, I just thought of a question. Miss She, please answer me directly. Meg's voice was slightly cold. Your underground city has always emphasized its superiority and absolute secrecy to the Norland continent. There are no records of the existence of underground cities on the Norland continent. Even the ancient tribes don't have any word of it. However, in the long history of the world, someone like today shouldn't be the first, nor will it be the last. That's why you set up a special law enforcement team to capture those who cross the boundary and erase all traces of your existence. What's laughable is that the residents of the Norland continent don't even have the right to know about the existence of your underground city, yet you can travel between the two realms as you please and humiliate them with the title of observer. They could even erase their memories at will or even kill them. Then what was the Norland continent? Pigsty. What are we? Are you raising pigs in a pigsty? In the command room of the battleship dozens of kilometers away, She's mouth was slightly agape. There was a trace of fear in his confused expression. Observer was a very special position. She had the position of colonel in the army, but the observer's resume would not appear in her personal information. It was classified as a top secret. After 3 months of training, she came to the Norland continent, completed her observation mission according to the work manual, and reported it regularly. She had never felt that there was anything wrong with it. It was just part of her job to fulfill her duty and complete the mission. However, after thinking about the question Meg just asked, she shuddered. In the work manual, hiding the existence of the underground city was a top secret. To do so, they could do anything to the Norland continent, including erasing it. It was not rare for people to cross the boundary. The law enforcement team would arrest hundreds of people every year. Some of them were rich ladies like Vicky. Their identities were enough for them to know about the existence of the Norland continent. Driven by curiosity, they used their identities to sneak into the Norland continent. Some of them were desperados who tried to enter the Norland continent to avoid being hunted down. The Norland continent was a place not under the control of the underground city. As for whether there were powerful people who used their identities to enter the Norland continent and bully people, she was not sure. If Vicky could do it herself, there should be many people in the underground city who could do it. A certain class in the underground city could enter and leave the Norland continent at will. They could erase their memories at will, but the natives of the Norland continent did not even have the right to know about their existence. What was this? Thinking about it, she felt a chill run down her spine. Her steel-like willpower that was honed in the army was wavering. She had been in the Norland continent for more than 3 months. To her, this world was no longer just a description in the records, nor was it a string of numbers. There were also diverse races in this world. They had their own writing, language, and civilization. Different races had disputes, but they also worked hard for peace. They also had the courage to unite and fight against the old dominators. This was a group of beings who had the same intelligence as the residents of the underground city. Although there was an obvious gap in technology and top-notch combat power, that was it. She did not know how to answer Meg's question. Or rather, she had seen the answer, but it was not the answer she wanted. I can't answer. She tried to make her voice sound calmer. Then please tell them that the Norland continent is actually very cruel. For monsters of this standard, kill them one by one. If they have the guts, go ahead. Meg grinned and hung up the phone. I've lost my composure, I've lost my composure. I'm still not calm enough. Meg sighed in his heart. This monster who came to snatch the divine baby today had touched Meg's bottom line. It did not feel good to be looked down upon and controlled by others. However, this was the situation when the Norland continent faced the underground city. That day in the far north, Xi's battleship could kill hundreds of thousands of undead soldiers on the battlefield, but the various races of the Norland continent had to fight to the end with their flesh and blood. The underground city might have many fleets of battleships of her level, or they might have battleships of a higher level with stronger firepower. If the Norland continent and the underground city were to fight now, not only would they lose their top-notch combat power, but they would also not be able to use their human wave tactics. After all, it was just a mecha that could be controlled remotely, and it almost wiped out the elves' top-notch combat power. Technology is the #1 productivity, Meg mumbled, and asked in his heart, System, can you give me a technology tree? Host, don't you realize that the history of the Norland continent is broken? But the underground city has existed for tens of thousands of years. Chapter 2399. The system's words made Meg fall silent for a long time. In tens of thousands of years, the underground city had developed powerful technology, and had the power and capital to look down on the Norland continent. Meanwhile, some races on the Norland continent were still /and-burn farming, relying on hunting to survive. The Norland continent's widely circulated chronicles were not long, spanning less than 10,000 years. Most of the time it recorded the wars between the various races. However, it was completely blank before 10,000 years. However, Meg had collected many ancient books, and some of them were carved on jade stones that spanned more than 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, the Norland continent also had a civilization, and it was even more advanced than the Norland continent of today. Then, this civilization disappeared as if it had been erased by someone. The various races on the Norland continent went back to the most primitive reproduction, strengthening, and war. It was like the beginning of a cycle. Meg was also puzzled as to why this happened for a period of time. Later on, he attributed it to the fact that when a civilization reached a certain level, it would start from scratch. Such a high-level civilization that existed and disappeared without leaving behind any records was not the only case on Earth. There were the Mayan civilization, the Three-Star Mound, ancient Egypt, and so on. Therefore, Meg did not find it strange that something like this happened on the Norland continent. However, what if there was an underground city in addition to this cycle? Although there was no evidence to prove that the underground city was the culprit behind the destruction of the Norland continent's previous civilizations, the simple association immediately made the smell of conspiracy hit him in the face. There were also the gods that the various races worshipped. They did not ascend, but were forced to hide or parasitize somewhere, and then chose the right time to reincarnate. What happened back then? Why were the powerful beings who had already become gods so pathetic? Seems like I still have to find a chance to go to the underground city. I should be able to get more useful information there. Meg thought to himself. Little Guy had not awakened the memories of his previous life, and that babbling little fellow was even more out of the question. He still had to think of a way himself. Meg and the rest were busy until evening before they bade farewell to Sally and prepared to return to Chaos City. Thank you for your hard work today. I'm really sorry for not being able to host you properly after such a thing happened, Sally said to everyone apologetically. It's okay, we didn't do anything. Mia shook her head and said with a smile, when you're done with your business here, come to the restaurant to play with us. We'll ask the boss to make you delicious food. Yes, yes. Father knows how to cook a lot of dishes now, Amy chimed in. Okay, I'll come. Sally nodded with a smile. The frost dragon took off and returned to Chaos City. Father, was that little girl transformed from a big tree? Amy asked curiously as she looked at Meg. Little sister, you're so cute. Xiao Guai wobbled into Meg's arms with an adorable smile. I think so. Meg nodded with a smile. He wondered how Irina planned to raise the child. The little guy was the hardest to deal with. As soon as he woke up, he had to be hugged and couldn't be separated at all. Say, the elves exchanged their queen and high priestess for a child. Could that child be the goddess of life? Camilla suddenly asked. Meg glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. This big-breasted woman wasn't so brainless after all. There are no gods in this world. If there is one, the person closest to being a god should be Alex, and not a newborn child. Elizabeth's cold voice came from below to express a different opinion. Meg nodded slightly. He liked to hear such words. The debate about the gods didn't reach a consensus in the restaurant in the end. Among all of them, Gina was the only one who knew the truth apart from Mag. After all, the baby who was sleeping soundly in his arms right now was the sea god. According to Meg's original plan, he wanted to slowly collect the reincarnated gods, and then set up a training class for them to raise them into gods with ideals, morals, culture, and discipline. However, the underground city's sudden intervention made him feel a sense of urgency. Under the premise that their technology was tens of thousands of years behind, the gods might be the only card on the Norland continent that could challenge the underground city. Only the gods could go against the underground city's fleet. Seems like I have to try to let little Guai control the power of the gods when I go back. If the supernatural beings from the underground city come looking for me, I might not be able to defeat them. Meg looked at little Guai, and fell into deep thought. Meg and the rest returned to the restaurant. Once they entered, Irina, who was carrying the baby, came up to them. She looked at Meg with an embarrassed expression and said, "Is this child spoiled? She's just whining and not sleeping." This. Meg took the child from Irina's arms. The little one looked at him with her watery eyes. She sniffed and whimpered pitifully. She was even biting her fingers. She's probably hungry. Did you give her anything to eat? Hungry. But she didn't eat the food I gave her just now. Irina was puzzled. What did you give her? Elf's favorite nuts, and pine nuts, Irina said. Look at this little girl. She doesn't even have teeth yet. How can she bite nuts? Meg rolled his eyes. The queen was really magnanimous to entrust this child to Irina. Really? I remember I grew up eating nuts. Irina frowned and pondered. I'll go get the goat's milk. Gina walked quickly to the kitchen. Little girl. She's so cute. Amy came forward and carried a stool herself. She climbed onto the stool and looked at the little one in Meg's arms with a smile. I miss little sister Kong too. Little Guai, who had just woken up, hugged Meg's thigh and climbed onto it. She's so cute up close. She looks a little like Amy. She's so cute. She has big, watery eyes. I feel like she'll cry for a long time if I pinch her. The girls also gathered around. Their eyes lit up when they saw the little one in Meg's arms. The little one wasn't shy with strangers. She blinked her big eyes and looked at everyone. However, her gaze often drifted to Irina, as if she was afraid that she would leave. Princess, are you all right? Phyllis came to Irina and looked at Irina worriedly. She couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes. Her Majesty the Queen had passed away. The princess must be very sad. Don't worry about Beansprout. I'm fine. Irina shook her head with a smile. She reached out and flicked Phyllis's forehead. Listen, crunch crunch. Ugh. Phyllis covered her forehead with tears in her eyes. Crunch, crunch, crunch. But her forehead was crunchy. However, it seemed like the princess had recovered. End of chapter. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.